This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come about more to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions, yeah?
Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 69B. I am your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khaled.
And today, we're picking back where we left off with the Grotto of Truth Q&A number 7.
Yes. We had a deluge of questions numbering around 16, but with some two-part questions interspersed in there. So we're splitting it up into two.
Yes, exactly. We actually have 17 questions now. We realized we missed one in the first part.
Yeah, we did miss one, and it's a good one, actually. One that we've discussed in the past, that we've debated previously.
Exactly. It'll be good to get into. So I guess, let's just dive in, shall we? Okay. So let's start with that missed question.
Yeah. Do you think there really were tunnels under McMartin Preschool? So I'm of two minds about this. It's possible that there were tunnels. The one thing that I think is quite sus that they found during the digging that they did around McMartin Preschool was the pentagram plate. Have you seen that picture?
Actually, that's not ringing a bell right now. But I remember they found some kind of trash underneath. If you look up pentagram plate
McMartin on Google, the first thing that comes up is like a Getty Images picture.
Oh, interesting.
Of
Getty
the plate.
Images.
Yeah, which is a weird plate. I mean, it's obviously
that's weird.
quite
Okay,
old.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
I like that they put the Getty Images stamp right over the pentagram. Almost right next to it, so that it's just letting you know who. And is that like a penny or something that's attached to kind of like a piece of sandpaper or something?
Scale. It's for scale.
Okay.
The penny's for scale.
See.
Yeah.
I see. So it's like a little, almost like a little tea saucer or something like that.
Yeah.
But it has this pentagram, which it's hard to tell if it's. Well, actually, I don't know. Can we determine whether or not it's supposed to be held upright or
no, you
downward?
can't. I mean, it is.
Really.
I mean, it is a common way to draw a five-pointed star, and there are also two other stars in between two of the points, which I don't know.
That's what I was looking at.
Is having any kind of symbology to it. It could just be like but it's an odd thing to have a drawn star. I mean, it is a pentagram technically. It is within a circle. It's on a plate, so it is unusual, but it's not obviously definitive evidence of anything. That to me is the one weird thing they found during the dig. But there was that archaeological dig that I think it was Stickle. There was, I think Gary E. Stickle was the archaeologist who did it.
Yes. I think so, from UCLA, right?
Gary Stickle, yes, who was hired by, I think, some of the McMartin parents to look into it, and I think actually Ted Gunderson might have been involved in that archaeological excavation.
Yes, he was, and they claim to have found tunnels. I'm actually looking at a Los Angeles Times article from 1990 called "Man-Made Tunnels at McMartin Preschool," which I believe is a kind of a letter to the editor by Ted L. Gunderson from Santa Monica. And he wrote that in reply to the article, "Parents dig persistently for evidence," Metro, June 5th, Jackie McGooley, who I guess he dated, is paraphrased in the caption of that's the one who said that Ted Gunderson would talk to Aquino on the phone every day. But he writes, Jackie McGauley is paraphrased in the caption above her picture as stating she believes the pentagram on a plate found at the McMartin preschool site is among evidence of alleged satanic rituals at the school. Although it is a bizarre find, Mrs. McGauley has never made this statement, not even to her closest associates. Only further research can establish this possibility. The article states that the parents and I have tried to make the public believe that a long-rumored network of underground tunnels were discovered in early June. The reporter states I offered boxes and boxes of artifacts as, quote, further proof that the preschool operators maintained and then tried to cover up a tunnel system. I have never accused the McMartins or Buckys of this. My statements thus far have been clear and concise that the results of the excavation by the archaeologists, geologists, and their team simply prove that there were man-made tunnels under the preschool foundation, as alleged by the children. So...
Okay.
You know, I mean,
yeah.
You could question the source, obviously, but okay, I'm gonna come down hard because we've had some lively debates over the tunnel issue over the years, right?
Yeah.
This has been something that has been a sticking point. Yeah, of the kind of satanic panic litigation, and I have always been probably since I think I first really read about it in like 2014. Been pretty kind of pro tunnel. I mean, I'm not pro the tunnels, you know what I mean? But like,
you're
pro tunnel theory.
You believe that you're convinced that there were tunnels underneath the preschool.
Partly due to my anti-tunnel, ideology. If you catch my drift.
Yeah,
these
right.
Fuckers.
Yes.
And I think I don't know. I think the normative explanation.
I'm a little bit persuaded by the rural homeowner trash pit idea. Because they themselves admitted that they weren't able to do a more substantial investigation that would have yielded more information. What they did determine was that there was an area that had been filled in with different soil. And this was a rural area where like rubbish pits were a common thing. So it's definitely conceivable. I mean... They weren't able to like really explore to see if there was a tunnel network. So while possible, it also, could not be tunnels. I mean, I'm not really sure. Like, I almost feel like I wonder if McMartin is something where there were all these weird people kind of swirling around it, and I wonder if this was kind of meant to be a shitcoat situation. There were a lot of things around that time, like the finders and all of that stuff, and McMartin is something that obviously gets invoked all the time to as the sort of dark conclusion of the satanic panic, the modern day sort of Salem hysteria. So I almost wonder if this was something that was like a trap, and whether there actually was anything going on at McMartin.
Well, I disagree. Basically, I just The thing that I remembered about it is one that these things did seem to be hand dug tunnels that had a lot of materials in them that didn't add up with it being I remember they found like kind of like Disneyland like lunch boxes and weird shit like that down there. They
found like a bag, like a Disney bag, but.
A Disney
that
bag.
Kind of thing does happen, like that animals like pull things underground, like they found lots of stuff. And in fact, even the archaeologist Thierry Sickle, who did the report in favor of tunnels, did use that explanation for things that weren't consistent with his theory, so it was just a matter of which things were pulled there by animals, whether like it's the paraphernalia that's more contemporary or the paraphernalia that's consistent with the time period, that it would have been, a previous owner's trash pit.
Well, but I'm just there was a
most
there was a
of the
plastic...
stuff down there was dated earlier. The Disney bag and other such things. Yeah.
Because I'm reading, I'll share this with you right now. I found the article where, parents dig persistently for evidence. So this is the main article that Gunderson was responding to. It has lays out a lot of the claims. It's from 1990, and it says that they did find a Disneyland box from, let's see, Yeah, they recovered a dog, lamb, pig, and chicken bones, wood and tar paper, a saucer with a pentagram, and a plastic bag dated 1982 from Disneyland. The date is important, Gunderson said, because it suggests the tunnel was used during the time the preschool, which was built and opened in 1966, was operating. So, to believe the trash pit theory, you have to believe that all that trash was thrown in there like decades and decades and decades ago. But then why were there things from the 80s?
Well, the theory is that, that's the problem. The problem is that there were mostly things from the 30s and 40s, and there were a couple of things like that Disney bag from recently, and there was a mailbox from the person who owned the property from 1942 to 1972. The one thing was the Disney bag that stuck out. So there's two theories. You could say that all the other stuff was like pulled there by rodents, or that the Disney bag, the sandwich bag, was pulled there by rodents. Which, they both use this idea of intubation or whatever, or enturbation. I forget what it's called, but something where rodents pull things underground. Yeah.
Here's the thing, though, and I remember this is the one that really jumped, where from Stickles' report, and this is the strongest evidence, I think, that some kind of tunnel system could have been operating. So Stickle, who has a doctorate in archaeology from UCLA, said workers found numerous trenches around and under the school, and all but two have been explained as construction or utility related. The two are a 45-foot-long opening underneath two classrooms and a crawl space running from the school's front office to a triplex east of the preschool site. Once workers removed the debris that filled the two openings, Stickle said he concluded that the passageways were handmade. Each was about 4 feet high, and the opening under the two classrooms varied in width from 2.5 to 9 feet. At the point where the two tunnels passed under the foundation, Stickle said the foundation was, quote, even arced as if someone had attempted to shape it. And, Bucky's attorney said the parents are grasping at straws. So, there are long utility trenches underneath the school, like a basically 45-foot long opening and a crawl space running to a triplex east of the preschool site. So I remember reading about this, that there basically was a trench that went to, I believe, the property next door to them and went under that house. And that was never kind of followed up on. Because that does sound then, it's not like, okay, it's part of a vast tunnel system that stretches all around Los Angeles and, it's like, going underneath Area 51 and people are driving around in those little go-karts or something. You know what I mean? It's like, I think even the children described it as kind of a cramped, hand-dug tunnle in a lot of cases. So that's like, that kind of satisfies the definition of a tunnel.
Discrepancies about the
like
tunnel.
Yeah, but I'm... Mm-hmm. And as we talked about everything else, because then you have to kind of throw out everything else about, they said they saw Chuck Norris, or they saw a witch on a broom, or things like that, and saying it was all bullshit. But, this was funded by the parents. So, yes, maybe Ted Gunderson slipped in. One thing that's interesting about this article, vis-a-vis, because, I don't trust Ted Gunderson, but what he said is that, Gibbons was, I forget who Gibbons was. Was he? Oh, Sandy Gibbons was a spokeswoman for the DA's office. She basically poo-pooed this whole thing. And they claim, district attorney investigators, acting on the children's description. Okay, one child testified during the first trial about the existence of a secret room used for molestation, and he did not describe it as being underground. Word of the subterranean chamber came from about a dozen students, none of whom were called to testify. Acting on their descriptions, that's like 12 kids, the district attorney investigators surveyed the school property in the spring of '85 using special sonar equipment. They took soundings both around the buildings and in the classrooms for soft spots under the foundation that might indicate soil had been disturbed or removed, or that there were hollow areas consistent with talk by some children of a 9-foot wide chamber. So, okay, maybe they didn't find a 9-foot wide chamber. And they said nothing odd turned up. The entire site was investigated and we were satisfied, said Gibbons. But, so basically then the parents went and financed this on their own. Gunderson said prosecutors showed little interest, fueling the belief among parents that DA Reiner's office, criticized for its handling of the first case and under fire again for its performance in Bucky's retrial, is not committed to the case. The level of mistrust is so high that Gunderson, who headed the Los Angeles FBI office from 1977 to 1979 before becoming a private investigator, said artifacts gathered by the parents from the school site will be taken to a secret location to be studied, cataloged, and eventually dated. Now, this is critical here. Quote, "We are not turning any of it over to the DA's office," Gunderson said. "I don't trust them, and besides, I don't think they wanted to find tunnels, so who knows what they might do with our evidence." Gunderson is viewed with suspicion in some quarters, partly because of his longtime reputation as a maverick and because of his personal involvement with one of the McMartin parents, Magali. She acknowledged a romantic relationship with him that predates the parents' project. And, okay, so that jumped out at me right there, because Gunderson swooped in on to this parents group, and these I mean, unless we're saying that all the parents were either deceived or delusional or kind of full of shit, or they got psyoped by therapists or something, you know, I assume that they genuinely believe that their kids were abused and they wanted to investigate this. So that, but then they bring in Gunderson, and Gunderson starts kind of doing this like sort of a like 1980s version of like QAnon shit, where he's like, "Oh, they're the satanic pedophiles. Like they're everywhere. You can't trust the DA's office. You have to give all the evidence we get. Like we have to give it to me, and we'll take it to an undisclosed secret location, and you know, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like who know? He says, who knows what they might do with our evidence? But like, what did Ted Gunderson do with that evidence? Where'd it go? You know what I mean? Like, what happened with it? So
did he say what? There was evidence, but we don't
I think
necessarily know now.
The
what
Disneyland
it
bag. Well, no, like the Disneyland bag, the animal bones, like just
bag.
Yeah, and I think even just maybe like even the more detailed like reports that were written up by the archaeologist who went there, you know, all that stuff is, instead of being, not that he might be right that you can't trust the DA's office, but why should they trust Ted Gunderson? And he's dating like the woman who is kind of leading this project, almost like, you know, those stories you've read about like British MI5 agents like going undercover in like socialist parties and like having children with like other radicals, and then like they've been a cop the whole time. Remember there was like a famous story like that years ago of like, you know, if somebody's really going undercover, like they might get deep into the job and or just get entangled up in it and everything. And then what's he doing with the evidence, you know? Because it's almost like he's speaking so boldly and calling out the government and saying, and with the kind of resume that he has, like a, you know, head of the Los Angeles FBI office, damn, right? And, you know, so people trust him. So I think that it doesn't necessarily mean there weren't tunnels, but that he ran off maybe with all the evidence that maybe could have proved something or didn't. But either way, it didn't seem to end up going anywhere. And all the cases collapsed, and, like, then it got branded as, like, the ultimate satanic panic case. And then Oliver Stone and James L. Woods, like, made a movie, like, financed by people connected to, like, the McMartin family and the Buckys that like had him basically like erming the shit out of the entire satanic panic abuse, you know, narrative. You know, it's almost like Geraldo and Oprah and Ted Gunderson set it up and then they spiked it, and now it can't be taken seriously. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like it seems like, okay, if you had a tunnel, it would be convenient. I'm just thinking like, to take children out through a little tunnel to the next property, and then you could like put them into a van or something and then drive them somewhere. Like that actually doesn't seem like super insane. Like I think people, I don't know, people get really hung up on like the wackiness of like secret tunnels, but it's just kind of like an underground, like a utility trench to like get under the crawl space of the house. Like it might not be and you know, we always talked about like, what if these kids were drugged? A lot of them said they were drugged, so you know, things could be relative. Like their recollection might not be literal. I believe that some of them did say that. They said that they were drugged. Yes, exactly. Yeah, there were a lot of them said that actually.
Like in what terms?
Yeah. Let's see.
Because, like, do they know what drugs are? Like, or did they just say they drank something, or you know, and they got sleepy or something like that, or what?
Let's see. It would basically, but was talking about, I found this article that's probably 2005 called "I'm Sorry," which I think is maybe like a "Please execute me for lying about McMartin." Anyways, it was about Kyle Sapp told, and scores of other children were talking about school employees who had drugged them and touched their genitals, made them play sex games in the nude, used them as models in kiddie porn, and forced them to watch pet rabbits, mice, and turtles being killed. By the time the trials began more than 3 years later, many of these children's stories had grown even more bizarre. They now included being taken to local businesses or flown to faraway places to be molested in satanic rituals. Prosecutors feared that their case would be hurt by such testimony, and they dropped many children from the witness list. Others were pulled from the witness list by parents who worried about causing further psychological trauma. So ultimately, fewer than a dozen children testified at the trials of Ray Bucky and his mother. Kyle was not among them. Wow. And then this article goes on and is like false memories into him.
This article is from Kyle. No, because this is different from false memories because
he's saying he
Kyle
knew he made it up.
Now is just saying I lied. I didn't think that I had any false memories. I just lied because people asked me questions until I knew what they wanted me to say, and I said what they wanted.
This is a weird article. Yeah, I'm looking through it right now, and I mean, yeah, he's like saying, oh yeah, I think I got the satanic details by picturing our church. We went to American Martyrs, a huge Catholic church, and, I never wanted to go. And, they said, describe an altar, and he would describe one like the one in our church. Or instead of there was a priest in a green suit, I would say a man dressed in red as a cult member. I don't know. He's saying, I'm not saying nothing happened to anyone else at McMartin School. I can't say that. I can only speak for myself. Maybe some things did happen. Maybe some kids made up stories about things that didn't really happen and eventually started believing they were telling the truth. Maybe some got scared that the teachers would get their families because they were lying, but I never forgot I was lying. My stepdad was a police officer who had guns in the house. I remember when all of this was coming down, he was put on a leave of absence from work because he was being investigated for supposedly threatening the McMartin family. He was clear to that accusation. Apparently it wasn't true. But being only 9 years old at the time, I thought my dad was saying he would kill the McMartins. So in my mind, I figured no one from the school was going to dare mess with him because he would hurt them first. That made me feel secure. It could be a reason I never mixed up reality and fantasy and always knew I was lying. Wow. Whoa. Okay. His dad was a cop. His stepdad was a cop who wanted to kill the McMartins. But that is. I mean, maybe that is kind of. Maybe that is kind of a thing where. Maybe it started out as people actually talking about real abuse, and then. I mean, I have seen in some of the stuff I've read about McMartin before that it seems like whether it was intentional or not, that some of these investigators and therapists and things did kind of maybe accidentally, but kind of shitcoat the fuck up the trial by leading. I think there was some leading in this case. What's also reading all that stuff though, how similar does that sound to Franklin?
Well, what do you mean? What?
Well, okay, both Franklin and Presidio. Honestly, I mean, the same decade, these two things were going on, and I feel like with Franklin, especially because they're older kids, their testimony feels much more kind of stable and compelling, but it does veer in the same kind of territory of starting out with kind of abuse or things like that, or these kind of sex parties or whatever, but then getting more into terrifying cult stuff. And, I mean, it kind of links up.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of in a way, what they were looking for. Even the FBI, they were investigating at the time the finders, and they put, some McMartin stuff, in their finders file that you can now see. So what people were looking for at McMartin was based on stuff that was real, they knew was happening. So, the fact that it corresponds with certain things, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was true or whatever. Just because you say this person has a satanic cult, it doesn't mean if you're lying or if that's not true, it doesn't mean there's no satanic cults or
yeah, exactly,
yeah. So
because then everybody would have had to be lying or pressured.
That's
and
what
there's
McMartin
over
has
40
come
kids.
To mean. That's what McMartin has come to mean. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's even possible that there were tunnels. I'm just like not like 100% swayed on the tunnels. Like there could be, and like there could be abuse, or there could not have been. Both are totally possible. But yeah, in terms of the tunnels, I just feel like because they weren't able, and it's the same thing of like that kind of thing can operate on adults too. Like when you're expecting to find a tunnel and you find like something that's if you're digging under the Martin preschool, the center of this this national firestorm, and you find like a bunch of like openings, like curvy linear openings that are filled in with dirt, fresh soil, or different soil that's not the same as the surrounding soil. There's a clear difference in the soil line or whatever. Then you're gonna be like, oh my god, like obviously you're gonna be like, oh my god, like but the trash pit thing does make some sense, and I think that if they were able to explore more, and maybe that's part of the reason why, or maybe that's one of the reasons why we can lament the fact that it didn't come together, or there wasn't enough organization for further excavations. But yeah, it really kind of dissolved before they could to further excavate these tunnels. They were pressed for time. They had to. So right now it's kind of still nebulous whether they really were there.
Yeah. I just think, and the McMartin case was first too, because it was like 82, 83, 84. This was all popping up, and it was so much of a bigger deal than the Presidio case and Franklin, or the Finders for that matter, another one to add to that list, or the DC like callboy ring, with Craig Spence. Like it was the big one, and so maybe it was like designed to go down and take all the other ones with it in a huge shit show of like over the top kind of stories and stuff that first were, kind of pushed by very sus people like Geraldo and Oprah, and even participated in by like Aquino himself, and then kind of controlled demoed. And now, I'm looking at this 2005 article, and it's like somebody talking about how they watched that Capturing the Freedmans documentary, and it made them realize like that was all those guys in that movie. I don't know if you ever saw it, were totally falsely blamed in the 80s for being pedophiles. Yeah, it wasn't an indictment. I think it got nominated for an Oscar. I think it was one of the Jareckis did that. One of the Jareckis whose dad was in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book, but I digress. And wealthy kind of dude. And yeah, basically, but even in like the New York Times in 2004, there was an article, Victims Say Film on Molesters Distorts Facts. Yeah, Andrew Jarecki directed this. He created more ambiguity, they say, than actually existed about the case, both to heighten the dramatic impact of the film and to elicit sympathy for the Friedmans. The film tells the story of a disintegration of a seemingly average Long Island family after the father, Arnold Friedman, and his son Jesse were accused of molesting children in computer classes they held in the basement of their Great Neck home in the 1980s. And, this was like a really celebrated, kind of like the West Memphis 3 thing. It was like super celebrated by Hollywood, and was like, and they both pled guilty to dozens of counts of child molestation in 88. And Arnold Friedman killed himself in prison. And yeah, I guess then the son eventually got out. And, but like that was a good example of like how McMartin ended up shitcoding things for like a couple decades, basically, for like the next 20 years. Everybody was like primed to celebrate anything that debunked like a prosecution of like a child abuse ring in the 80s. Like anyone you could find where like they maybe got it wrong. And in this case, they pretty much concocted like a bullshit narrative about how they didn't do it. They found like tons of child porn that this guy had ordered from like Amsterdam, like in his place. Like he admitted to being a pedophile, but then was like, oh, but like I never acted on it. And so, you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
yeah,
come on.
This is actually, that reminds me of something crazy that I found while I was looking into this a little bit more, having seen this question, because I was trying to look up that FBI Finders file that included some McMartin stuff about the satanic plate and things like that. And one thing that I found was this article about, from the Tallahassee Democrat, and it said about the Finders that there's this picture of like these kids with rose smeared in goat blood and everything. But hold on, where was the? Yeah, okay. So the Metro Police searched 2 properties owned by members of the Finders, where they found documents, photos, and a large amount of computer equipment and, quote, instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes, unquote. All right. And then, later on in the exact same article, it says, finding no evidence of child sexual exploitation, kidnapping, or any related crimes, Metro Police dropped the case. The lifestyle of the so-called Founders Organization may differ from the societal norm, but so far the Metropolitan Police Department has not uncovered any evidence of criminal wrongdoing by members of the group, Washington Police Chief Maurice Turner told the Democrat. So they found documents about how to obtain children, which allegedly included information about getting female members pregnant, buying and trading, and kidnapping children. But
was this like the Dr. Campbell Ford handbook to child kidnapping?
But after that they turned around, like the police turned around and were like, listen, like their beliefs might be different from yours, but they haven't done anything wrong or whatever. Like, why do they have these documents about like how to trade or buy or steal a baby?
It's really I mean it's sus, and I think we got to do a whole Finders thing one day, because they are, I think some FOIA documents or something got kind of like leaked out in recent years, maybe.
Right, there was a whole file about them, and it does include some McMartin stuff, so there is the idea that like maybe they were connected.
Yeah, I'll just leave it with this. Another article that I found from 1987, another preschool witness dead. A former police officer who once served as a defense investigator in the McMartin preschool molestation case was found dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, police and prosecutors said. I'm going to read this like the radio guy at the end of Smuggler's Blues. It was the second death of a witness connected with a 4-year-old case. After the drug guy shoots him, and it's like local Miami businessman. Paul Bynum, 39, who was expected to testify today for the prosecution, was found dead Thursday morning in his Glendale home from a gunshot wound that was apparently self-inflicted. His body was discovered by his wife Vicky, an LAPD officer. And Supreme Court Judge William Pounders told jurors that Bynum's death was, quote, not due to any criminal cause, and ordered them to not speculate about it. Quote, all we know is that his body was found this morning.
Defendant?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
No. It was a defense investigator who was called by the prosecution to testify, and then in the morning he was going to testify, his wife found him dead with an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, and then the judge told the jurors that it was not due to any criminal cause and ordered them to not speculate about it. All we know is, there was a gunshot. He was investigator for the McMartin defense in February 1984. On Wednesday, defense attorneys unsuccessfully tried to keep him off the witness stand, saying that as a defense investigator, Bynum shared with them an attorney-client privilege. Prosecutors were prepared to have him testify, quote, that he, Bynum, went to the site of McMartin's school, and they dug up 2 tortoise shells and some animal bones. Children have alleged they were sexually molested while attending the school, and that defendant Raymond Buckey tortured and mutilated rabbits, turtles, and a pony at the facility to scare the children into keeping quiet. Quote, his testimony that might have been presented will be presented through other testimony and evidence later in the trial. And Buckey was charged with 79 counts of child molestation, and his mother, Peg McMartin Buckey, is charged with 20 counts of child molestation and shares a conspiracy count with her son. Prosecutors allege 14 children were victimized while they attended the school. And by the way, on December 19, 1986, Judy Johnson, the first parent to allege molestation at the McMartin preschool, was found dead in her home. The coroner's office said she died of a liver disease consistent with chronic alcoholism. So those are just 2 people that wound up dead in very interesting ways during the McMartin trial. So I mean that's almost like a sign. That's like Jeffrey Epstein getting hung like in jail. It's like a kind of a signal from whoever's behind the scenes that like, oh, we're gonna do this on the morning that he's going to go testify. That's like very David Ferry kind of thing. Oh, he just he had a drug overdose or something. Like wow. Not letting him get away with this one, folks. And if that means being a little generous, that there may have been tunnels, I'm gonna.
Well, one thing about McMartin that is sus outside of the possibility of tunnels is that they had like a system of fire alarms. I mean, this doesn't quite prove anything, but it is sus. They had a system of fire alarms, and a lot of people pointed to the fact that like they were, too high for kids to reach, which wouldn't on its own be too damning, because like, obviously you wouldn't want kids to be able to pull the fire alarm, but the fire alarms didn't connect to the fire department or anything. It was only an internal alarm system. So
wow. Okay.
What's that about?
That's sus.
Yeah.
That's sus. Yeah, I think that there might have been tunnels. I think they filled them in. It also they could have been dug out of a trash pit. Like, it could have originally been a trash pit, and it's like already a half dug tunnel. So why not keep digging it, and then you just fill it back up with soil and trash afterwards. And maybe there is some old stuff down there because that's what it was originally. You know what I mean? So, like, it could be both. It could have been a trash pit that was made into a tunnel.
Yeah, like they left all of the trash down there as part of the tunnel. I mean, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, or if it had been filled with trash but then filled in with soil, then they would have dug out maybe like the amount of soil they needed to make a tunnel, but then left some of the other stuff there. I could see that happening. Yeah,
I'm not sure, like, if it was it deep enough though that people could have like walked over the surface of the tunnel and like not cave the tunnel in. I feel like there was also some debate about that. If, like, where would the tunnel begin and end, like in terms of the depth of it. You wouldn't want somebody to be walking over your satanic tunnel and then just like the ground caves in. It'd have to be like pretty deep underground so that there would be some support.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading the actual report now of the person that was hired by it said that there was, I believe, a curvature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a possible tunnel feature was excavated from the toilet areas in classroom 1 in the office. The feature was distinguished clearly by the color and compaction of the interior soil, which was much darker and more loosely compacted. The feature appeared to connect the area beneath the office in classrooms 1 and proceed eastward toward the eastern outer wall of the preschool. Mr. Hobbs made a number of ancillary observations, summarized as followed. The children stated they entered a tunnel from the southeast corner of room 1. We dug down along the east wall of room 1 in the bathroom. As we followed the disturbed area south, it went under the wall into the now existing bathroom. After about 6 feet, it made an abrupt right turn to the east and headed for the neighboring property. The children had told 2 different stories about this tunnel prior to the dig. 1, that they had gone through the tunnel and come up in the house next door, and 2, they had come up in the garage, which blocked the house from the street. At any rate, the tunnel went in that direction. I went to the house next door and followed the walk between the school and the house, which were only about 4.5 feet apart. I went under the house and bellied my way towards the southwest corner of the house. After going about 20 feet, I found an area inside the west wall of the house where the floor was cut out. If I remember correctly, the area of the floor that was missing was 36 inches by 38 or 41. You could reach up and touch the bathtub, which was exposed. The plumbing in that area appeared to be quite new. I went back to the school and continued to dig. The tunnel I had been following was now headed toward the corner of the house where I had found the hole cut in the floor. I was very close to the foundation of the house, I was sure, so I poked a hole up through the surface. The hole I punched through was about 2 feet beyond the west wall of the house and about 1.5 feet outside the south wall. This tunnel was in direct line with the cutout opening under the house. In addition to the difference in soil composition, the tunnel feature was distinctive from the surrounding matrix and from some other tunnel features discovered later, in that it had been backfilled with earth that contained virtually no large artifacts or ecofacts. It did contain numerous flecks of charcoal and carbon and pieces of plaster with green paint, which the excavators hypothesized might be the remnants of the green paint that had been applied to the school in 1984 or 85, and possibly of the fire that had occurred within the building on April 8th, 1984. Oh yeah, there was a fire, right? The maximum depth of the feature was 6 feet, and its excavated length was over 26 feet. The feature fulfilled 4 of the 5 test expectations as a tunnel, lacking only a well-defined roof contour. Yeah, so I guess the most definitive discoveries came to light through following the vein of artifactual debris from the tunnel portal under the west wall of classroom number 4. An apparent tunnel signature veered southward once inside the foundation. The width and direction were clearly indicated not only by the abundance of historic artifacts contained within it, but also the soil color of the fill matrix was distinctly darker than the surrounding natural soil. The average width of the tunnel feature was greater than 4.5 feet, as it extended on the diagonal completely across Unit 1 and under the concrete floor to the western edge of Unit 1. Proceeding southward, the tunnel feature widened at one point to the extent that it appeared... Oh, okay. Hold up. Proceeding southward, the tunnel feature widened at one point to the extent that it appeared less tunnel-like and more like a room, maybe 9 feet wide, perhaps. Also at that point, a layer of plywood roofing material, along with tar paper and roofing nails, was found at the top of the tunnel fill material. Underneath the plywood and tar paper was a continuing abundance of bottles, wood, and other debris. It became obvious that this densely packed debris-filled area was quite large in relation to the tunnel passage previously described. This room-like feature extended southward to the area under the doorway to Classroom 4 and the sidewalk corridor beyond. And, they thought that the layer of plywood and tar paper may have served as a kind of roof for the room-like portion of the feature, continued in an arc to the east across the east side of the southeast corner of Trench Unit 1. There were obvious soil color and density demarcation lines at the roof, floor, and sides. The overburden of soil forming the existing roof of the tunnel at that point was 22 inches thick, measuring from between the bottom of the concrete floor and the demarcation of the former tunnel cavity. So I think that's basically, okay, so 22 inches is your answer, I guess. So about 1.5 feet or something. The walls of this wider area bore shovel-marked scars. These scars indicated the tunnel had been dug out with hand tools rather than mechanized equipment. The depth of the tunnel in the room-like area was a little more than 6 feet 8 inches, which would have permitted most adult males to stand upright. In contrast, the depth of the tunnel in the passageway leading up to the room-like feature was more shallow at an average of 5'11", which would have required most adult males to bend over when walking through the passageway. A major artifact was found buried within the room-like feature, an intact rural roadside-style mailbox. This mailbox had the name and address of the last occupants of the house that stood on the adjacent lot until it was torn down in 1972. The tunnel direction changed dramatically beyond the room-like area, turning to a dog leg headed acutely eastward. A crucial dilemma was imminent at this point. With only 2 days left to complete all excavation, there was not time to both explore the full dimensions of the possible room and to follow the ultimate extent of the tunnel. Although important data may well have been missed by not fully exploring the room, it was considered more important at the time to redirect full effort to explore the tunnel. It was hoped that the more the tunnel feature could be defined, the more possibilities there would be for making correlations with the eyewitness reports of the children. And as they dug the tunnel fill eastward, it became apparent that the line of the tunnel continued across Classroom 4 into the cut through the floor at Unit 1. The width of the tunnel was still about 3 feet. The height of the tunnel feature was unlike the room area, returning to the 5'11" average height of the western passageway. Some boards and a few tin cans were still found in the tunnel within Unit 2, but they petered out until no more major artifact inclusions were encountered beyond about 3/4 of the way across the unit. So, yeah, I mean, it keeps going, but, okay, I'll just read the conclusion, basically, to this, because I'm feeling vindicated right now. The project determined the existence of 2 extensive tunnel complexes beneath the concrete floor of the McMartin Preschool building. One toward the south was consistent with the location and function described by children. It appeared to connect the interior of the preschool with the adjoining triplex structure, and it had a distinct signature where it exited under the foundation of the east wall. Since it lacked datable artifacts and a consistent demarcation of floor profile, it was classified conservatively as a, quote, possible tunnel. The feature that conformed scientifically to the predetermined attributes as a tunnel was the complex on the north. This tunnel feature was clearly distinguished from the other subsurface features encountered during our excavations at the site. The northern tunnel feature conformed to virtually all the test expectations as follows. 1, an identified entrance. 2, the architecture was both linear and slightly curvilinear. 3, the architecture was large enough for adult human passage. 4, there were characteristic scars indicating it had been dug by hand. 5, the feature had a compacted dirt floor. 6, the tunnel was found not open. 7, the tunnel had been completely artificially filled in with fill, which was distinguishable on the basis of color, texture, and compaction from the original soil deposit at the site. 8, the fill contained inclusions in the form of a large number of artifacts. And 9, the probabilistic dating of the tunnel can be estimated by recovered artifacts. And therefore, I guess the following 7 factors determine probable age. First, it is unlikely that the bright stainless steel straps had been placed on the pipe in 1966 when the structure was built. Second, the placement of the mailbox most probably dates to the time following the destruction of the neighboring house in 72. Third, the Disney bag is a date of 1983, which indicates that the tunnel fill dates to that time or thereafter. Fourth, the arching of the foundation precisely over the tunnel was obviously a feature made to accommodate the tunnel, and there was no other conceivable scenario to account for it. Fifth, the 4 large containers which were placed by hand into the tunnel fill indicate the use of the tunnel after the preschool was built. built. Given their positions under the foundation, there is no possibility that they would not have been knocked out of place and their intact glass bottle and jar contents broken when the trench was excavated in 1966 for the pouring of the concrete foundation. 6. The ceiling of the tunnel was simply too shallow to have withstood human foot traffic on it on an unprotected state. If the tunnel feature had existed prior to the construction of the preschool, its covering or roof would have been so shallow that a person walking on the surface would have easily caved it in, thus exposing the tunnel. Finally, the soil deposit at this part of the property had been put into place and compacted at the time of the building construction. Therefore, any holes or openings found in that area extending up to or near the surface would necessarily date to a time after 1966. Therefore, given the evidence of the 7 factors above, the time and construction of the tunnel and use of the tunnel post-dates 1966. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah. But a lot of stuff in the tunnel, like for instance the mailbox, like why would the earlier person's mailbox have been in the tunnel? And also like maybe it was just filled in previously. Maybe they were filled in trash cans.
Okay. Hold on. I think you're missing the forest like for the tunnels here. Like there is an extensive tunnel system that led to an opening in the house next door, both in the garage and where there was a bathtub covering it, that if you moved aside, there was basically a hole. And that hadn't been, I guess, patched up or filled in. And one to the garage where you... Yeah, that's what he said. That's what he said about the bathtub.
Hole? Yeah.
That was what I remembered reading years ago that basically like tunnel pilled me completely, was that this is too extensive. What they're talking about and the way it was constructed is not a trash pit. This is a tunnel. This is at least a local tunnel system on this property. And he even said they ran out of time and were not able to go further and explore the ultimate extent of the tunnel. So like that, I feel like this blows out of the water the idea that it was it might have started as a trash pit, and they certainly put a bunch of trash. Somebody put a bunch of trash in there.
There's tons of trash.
But this is
yeah.
Like, what about the room that is like 6'8" and 9 feet wide? You know what I mean? Like, why is there a room? Why does it go to the next property? If it goes to the next property, that means that it sounds like what the kids were. The kids even said that they were taken to the house, like a tunnel to the house next door, and that's exactly what he found. And, you know, if you're trying to, like, traffic children to a third location, you bring them up through the tunnel in the garage, you pull a car in there, you put them in the car, and then you leave, and nobody ever sees anything. I think that's tremendously convincing. I think that, you know, I mean, this is like a expert, like a tunnel expert, saying that, like, every aspect of it is tunnel-y, and, like, basically...
Yeah, but other people have examined it, like, in retrospect.
Oh,
and,
other
like,
people.
when you're, you know, other archaeologists... I don't know. Maybe. You know, it is possible. Like, you know, I'm not saying there wasn't there might have been a tunnel, but most of the debris they found is from like the 30s and the 40s, and like they found like that person's, you know, like it could be a series of trash pits, but it also could be a tunnel. It could be a tunnel. You know, it could have been...
The trash could have been there. The trash could have been there all along. It also... Things could have been... I mean, if like the mailbox of the old place was there, they might have used it as a trash pit, like, up until, you know, like, basically, yeah. Like, it might have just been a big hole that had a bunch of crap thrown in it over the years, and they didn't necessarily take all the crap out when they built their tunnel system. But it appears that somebody did something underneath this preschool and constructed like roofs, and it had curvature, and it had, you know, a linear, it winds, it's like 40 feet long. You know, these are like long passages. Like at one point, does it stop being a trash pit? You know, I figure a trash pit is more of like maybe a square or rectangular or a circular kind of
usually
thing,
what you do
not
is
like a bunch of long hallways.
Once the trash pit is filled, you would dig another trash pit next to it. You know, once you fill it up with trash, then you fill it in with soil, and then you dig another trash pit adjoining. So, you know.
Show me like an expert archaeologist like it going in on the theory of trash pits that like completely lines up with like what this guy found. Otherwise,
well, there is one which is, you know, about review and a behavioral analysis of the tunnels found. I don't know if you've read this, but you know what? I'm not sure.
Behavioral analysis.
Yes, and it's a sort of reappraisal of the tunnels in a possible trash pit mode.
Who wrote this?
And yeah, it's W. Joseph Wyatt of Marshall University.
What was under the McMartin preschool in
Yes.
2011 or to 2002. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. We'll be fair. We'll be fair to the anti tunnel crowd out here.
I mean, it could be. Well, I don't know what the behaviors for social responsibility. That seems like a sus journal title, but I think that
He
the
puts
trash
tunnels
bin
in
idea,
quotes.
Yeah, well, he's anti-tunnel, so
I'm reading his
definitely
abstract right now.
hardcore anti-tunnel.
Wow, a theoretical functional analysis of the variables that may have accounted for the archaeologist's evident misinterpretation is presented. Okay, you're just gonna do like a theory brain, like weird psychological functional analysis of something. Okay, I don't know. Have you read that? Maybe we'll...
Yes, I have. It's, based on the idea of operant seeing, which is just that if you expect to see something, like I said, if you saw Under the McMartin Preschool, if anybody saw Under the McMartin Preschool at the time, anything that, was a long trench that had, different soil around it filled in, then you would say that was a tunnel. There's no way.
But that's you're talking about an archaeologist who was hired to get to the bottom of something and not, basically use their professional judgment.
Well, he was hired to get to the bottom of the it's the same thing.
And he found something that basically, according to his professional opinion, absolutely resembled a system of hand-dug tunnels underneath the property that, may or may not have originally started out as a trash pit 50 years ago, but had definitely been modified after 1966 when the preschool had been open and then filled in.
I think, a pretty good example of this sort of confirmatory bias that some of that does have. Just to.
I mean, obviously there is for the parents. I'm sure they were convinced, but it's the evidence that he's putting up isn't just he's backing it up with with facts and logic, basically. He's offering up a cogent opinion based on his professional expertise that this is what the scientific community classifies as a tunnel. And so here are the things that I found that absolutely match the characteristics of a tunnel. And it was really long and it had rooms and all this other shit. So it basically, the story of it just being a trash pit does not add. It's not him just it looks vaguely like a tunnel and I'm dumb, so I'm just gonna go with, you know what I mean? I don't know. That's a big leap to say that he wasn't thinking rationally and he just wanted to say there were tunnels. Maybe, but I don't see, reading the report, it doesn't sound like he's making leaps in that kind of way.
Well, one thing that jumps out to me as a leap is the idea that the tunnel had to have been built recently because the roof would have been so shallow that if it had existed previously, then it would have caved in. So that, to me, is a big leap, because that's pretty much assuming the foregone conclusion that's a tunnel, when if it were to be something else that had been filled in previously, then that wouldn't have been an issue, because there wouldn't be a roof. It would be a filled-in trash pit. That's an example of something that jumps out to me as a possible leap, but I get it,
but I mean, if you've also followed that logic, if somebody was to empty out that trash pit and then build a tunnel, they would have to build some kind of roof structure to support it.
Yeah, they would, if they did that.
Yeah, if they did that. But then, I mean, what's the explanation for the roof structure? I guess absent that.
Well, there wasn't. What was the roof structure? There was only.
Or there was a layer. I mean, there was a kind of. Yeah, there was kind of the layer of plywood and tar paper or whatever that was kind of
Well, they found
basically
plywood and roofing materials, right? That they were found, in the quote unquote tunnel fill material, but that also could have been trash.
I think it was more extensive than that. It had, contained Unit 3 under Classroom 3 contained the intriguing remains of wood posts. They were found in situ, still in upright positions. Both posts were the remain of 4x4 timbers. The first one had been burnt. The second one was more intact and only slightly burnt. They seemed to be spaced at regular intervals due to their relationship parallel to the east wall, extending from north to south in Classroom 3. They may have been part of a shoring system for an underground passageway, but there was no longer any time to explore for corroborative evidence. So I mean, yeah, he's not saying that, like, he's not making these leaps in this of saying like absolutely like confirmed tunnel, but he's saying like they may have been part of this kind of system. He's exploring this hypothesis, but like not coming down on it and saying like, because he doesn't have
like
the literal
this is the part
concrete
about the plywood and the roofing materials. A layer of plywood roofing material along with tar paper and roofing nails was found at the top of the tunnel fill material. Underneath the plywood and tar paper was a continuing abundance of bottles, wood, and other debris. So why was it just filled with all this debris? Like, it's not just like normal fill dirt. Like, it's like that you would just get a bunch of fill dirt and it happens to be filled with like bottles and like all this trash. Like, why?
Maybe if you were trying to make it look like a trash pit.
Yeah. Okay. I guess. Yeah. Sure,
yeah.
Right, okay. Sure.
Why wouldn't they try to make it look like a damn trash pit? Of course, Okay. Like, it makes perfect sense that they would try to do that. I don't know. I'm just not. I'm not willing to give them like the benefit of the doubt. Like, why is there a gigantic room? Why does it go to the next property with a hole over a bathtub and the fucking garage? Like, and then why is everyone dying during this case? Why did it get shit coded and like create the whole satanic panic narrative? Like, it's all too sus. And the fact that, like, there's a lot wrong with the McMartin case, but I think that
satanic panic narrative, like, why would they choose something that, like, had actual tunnels there? Like, that's, my thing. Like, why?
Well, they didn't. It was hard for them to get. It's not like they just got to go and check out if there were tunnels. Like, this is kind of a difficult thing to do.
I mean, they
and
did,
then
like,
eventually they
demolish the whole
it.
school,
Yeah.
Yeah, like, they.
Yeah,
it was,
and the Presidio daycare caught on
obviously
fire twice on the fall solstice on Walpurgisnacht. So sometimes these things just happen.
I think
super crazy.
Walpurgisnacht is not the. Well, for one, there is no fall solstice. It's an autumnal.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, autumnal. You're right. It was set on fire in the autumnal equinox, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I think it's still. I guess we're both still dug in. So I guess we'll have to explore it further and really, dig to the absolute bottom.
I'm not as dug in on no tunnels as you are on there were tunnels. I'm just like a little bit. Dug in. I'm just a little bit skeptical. Like, I can see the counter argument, but I do see aspects of the counter argument, and the whole thing. Ted Gunderson to me is pretty sus. The whole thing is like the way that it just became this huge cause celeb. It's very possible that there's something going on with McMartin. It's true. Like, maybe we can relitigate that further at another time. But I don't know. Yeah. Again, I'm not as dug in, but I do see some of the reason in the tunnel skepticism. But there is some good tunnel evidence. The hole in the bathtub. I don't know what.
That's pretty. It never gets talked about. Nobody ever talks about it going to the next property. I feel like that's the most damning thing for me, because also if it's a trash pit for one property, why would it go to the next property? That seems like another unlikely thing.
Maybe if the property
used to be one property
had continued, it used to be one property. Yeah, I don't quite know, but I'm not sure like what the nature. Like, why would there be a portal into the tunnel that they had left open, if they were going through all the trouble of like disguising it as a trash pit. A lot of it doesn't quite add up, that this was just like a missing access point that they just left.
I guess I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, that does stick out a little bit as like odd. Like, I don't actually know who owned this house next door to them and what their kind of deal was, where presumably they let this guy, or the house was abandoned or something. Like, they let this guy like walk into their house and like look around and move stuff around and look for openings and things like that. I guess they got permission to do it.
Yeah, it must have not been in use, or it was.
Or maybe they sold. Maybe the people that were there like sold it and moved away, so somebody else was living there. But it is a little odd that like whoever was involved in those tunnels or whatever, why wouldn't they attempt to like fill that in better and not make it more obvious? Unless, I don't know, it's like maybe like fussing with it too much would leave more evidence that you were fussing with it and building a tunnel and like covering up a tunnel. So like in a way, like just leaving it in kind of this weird like ambiguous state. Like there's a lot, it's like there's a bit of Dracularity in this tunnel. Like, I don't know. It's like, is it a trash pit? Is it filled with dirt? And then they didn't really have enough time.
It is filled with dirt.
We can definitely both agree that it's filled with dirt.
It was filled with dirt, but when? And
the question is when
whom?
it was filled with dirt. Yes, and by whom? Yes.
And I guess we'll have to dig into it more one day.
We'll have to actually literally go there ourselves and do another dig through the tunnels in order to settle.
Right? Yeah. I wonder if anything's on the property now. Exactly. Just go with the little like metal detector thing. Yeah, exactly. Get a good hour out of that question.
Yeah, out of that question. All right. Yeah.
In what may become one of the biggest child molesting cases ever on record, 7 nursery school teachers were arraigned today on more than 100 counts of child molestation.
The accused include the preschool owner, 76-year-old Virginia McMartin, her daughter, and 2 grandchildren.
Finding out just what happened to the McMartin preschoolers in Manhattan Beach, California, would spark a national media obsession.
A case which has shocked much of Southern California and caused a lot of parents to worry about the safety of their children.
Setting off a panic around the country.
In alarming numbers, preschoolers have been exploited.
Could it be your child?
The media blitz demonstrated unstinting belief that this had happened.
It was sensational and lurid and seemed to always be expanding.
1,400 children in this community have been ritualistically abused.
But were they? Decades
later. That
was
a doozy. But we're gonna power through these. So we got
push
number
on.
9 here.
Let's go. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna power through it. Keep digging. So number 9 is from Not Fox Mulder, and they ask, "You guys got any leads on sci-fi writer Robert Heinlein? Beyond his naval background and the fact that Starship Troopers is still on the U.S. military's reading list, he was involved in Edgar Mitchell's Institute of Noetic Sciences, which no doubt had connections to SRI and the put-off Swan Geller stuff. Also had some free love views I haven't looked into and some sketchy views on race that I haven't looked into." So, yeah, he's come up before. I think he came up in Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And maybe even during
Strangeland.
Yes, he did, which I guess was very influential. I don't want to get this wrong, but I feel like it was very influential in like the Laurel Canyon scene. Maybe it was also influential in the 60s hippie, like San Francisco, Palo Alto kind of milieu. And it is one of those things that I think counterculture people still would reference it as like this very far out, like cool, you know, I don't know, sci-fi thing, but I think that had like a very hyper libertarian kind of ethos to it. Stranger in a Strange Land. And, you know, Starship Troopers is like, I don't know, I'm kind of torn. It's almost had a bit of a cult revival in like recent years with the movie. And I like that movie. It was definitely aimed, I was like probably like 13 or something when it came out. But I mean, I always liked it. I think it is funny. I mean, I like Paul Verhoeven's kind of vibe of this like goofy sort of, you know, making fun of kind of like a fascist dystopia future kind of thing. But I mean, I guess it's still that novel is a little bit kind of fashy in a way. I mean, it's, I think I haven't read the book, and it's weird that it's on the U.S. military's reading list. That's actually really sus. And it actually is, okay, it even is kind of, wait a minute. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of a predictive programming movie. You have to add it to the Dracularity of 9/11 because it's kind of a. It came out in like 1999 maybe. It was one of those late 90s
when
movies.
Did the movie come out? Yeah, I think 99 might be right. I had to look it up though because I don't.
Yeah. Oh wow, 97. I forgot it was that early.
97. Yeah.
Yeah, 97. So, you know, I think that the parallels are pretty obvious. Like I always thought it was like funny in the movie that they all live in Buenos Aires, but they're all just like the most like white. Right. They're incredibly like Casper Van Dien is like looks like almost like a genetically modified like Ubermensch. Johnny Rico.
I mean, some Argentinians might get mad at you for saying that they're not already white because they
no, you're right.
Argentinians are pretty white, but
I mean, I guess this could be kind of the weird like you know, futuristic like all the like the white sort of ruling class of Argentina, but they all act like Americans, which is funny. So it's like all part of some kind of like fascist like like American yeah, and then Buenos Aires gets hit with an asteroid that is somehow like sent, like launched from this bug planet. And of course the bugs are kind of like the ultimate absurdist metaphor for like the swarthy other in, you know, that basically only can be exterminated. And of course, the movie, and I assume the book. Actually, yeah, no, I see this, that actually Paul Verhoeven and the screenwriter Edward Neumeier, they actually were attempting to satirize what Verhoeven saw as the fascist aspects of the novel. So I guess the novel was just more straight up fascist and like, look, this cool story about like killing bugs. And so he kind of made it as like a kind of, he flipped it on its head a little bit. So, for that, I respect Paul Verhoeven, because it is super fascist. Like, I mean, the idea of the things that are in the Starship Troopers movie being in the book but not ironic is kind of a funny thing to think about.
Yeah, the actual book itself is sort of a pay-on to, at least, like, the troops. Like, the troops in the book, like, it's not really a satire, the book itself. It's more...
like a manifesto, like the Turner Diaries or something.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. This is an interesting little tidbit. Apparently, that the arachnids are, some have speculated that they're a analog for communists, because they are, communal in nature.
Yes, they have like they have
Bug
telepathic.
Society is actually in the book described as communist at one point.
Oh my God. Yeah, I guess it was absolutely a metaphor for like the Cold War and communism, but on the side of, like, wouldn't it be badass if we went and exterminated all these bugs, all these godless communist bugs, that are, plotting our downfall. And I mean, this guy, he created, I actually didn't, it'd be interesting to do a deeper dive into him. I always knew he was sus. He hung out with a lot of the same, like, California sci-fi crowd that I think we talked about with Jimmy Fallon Gong, like the kind of Esalen adjacent people like Arthur C. Clarke and probably Walter Breen. I bet they knew each other. And he was a fanatical anti-communist, graduated from the Naval Academy in 1929, and he was like a huge advocate of nuclear weapons testing. He even created something called the Patrick Henry League with his wife, in an attempt to create support for the U.S. nuclear testing program. That was, I think, up until 1980. He was talking about doing more nuclear weapons testing. Yikes.
Cool.
This is really... yeah, so, I mean, this guy sounds like a fascist. It sounds like an American fascist who is just super... All the groovy counterculture people just thought was, like, totally far out, man. It's really funny to think about, like, sort of ostensibly, like, left-wing counterculture people in, like, San Francisco, like, totally standing this guy. It's just like, wow, okay.
Yeah, Stranger in a Strange Land is also a bit sus. I remember that, that's where the phrase grokking comes from, which maybe you hear sometimes out in California. That's
really?
The idea of
I did
grok.
not know that.
Yes.
That's like that's like one of my, MK trigger words. I think when like a Vox journalist or something was like, it's really just hard to grok what's going on.
I hate it when
the
people
White
say
House.
grok. Yeah.
Ugh, I hate it. I really hate it. Wow. So he came up with that. So that's cool. Makes
yes, he came up with that. Yeah, grokking is like understanding, I guess, and this is a funny passage from the Wikipedia summary of Stranger in a Strange Land. Smith continues to demonstrate psychic abilities, the alien in question, and superhuman intelligence coupled with childlike naivete. When Harshaw tries to explain religion to him, Smith understands the concept of God only as one who groks, which includes every extant organism. That leads him to express the Martian concept of life as the phrase, "Thou art God," although he knows that to be a bad translation. Wow. Thou art God, the classic.
Okay.
Great
you
idea.
know what?
Yes.
There's all kinds of wacky interlocks here. I guess he might have even been involved in some LaRouche victory shenanigans. I'm seeing here in 1980, he was a member of the Citizens Advisory Council on National Space Policy, which met at the home of science fiction writer Larry Niven to write space policy papers for the incoming Reagan administration. Members included such aerospace industry leaders as former astronaut Buzz Aldrin. Aldrin lied, folks. I'm sorry. But anyways, I think we have a question for next month. We won't get into that. General Daniel O. Graham, aerospace engineer Max Hunter, and North American Rockwell VP for Space Shuttle Development George Merrick. Policy recommendations from the council included ballistic missile defense concepts, which were later transformed into what was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, as derided by Senator Ted Kennedy. Heinlein assisted with council contribution to the Reagan Star Wars speech of spring 1983. Wow, so he helped write Reagan's Star Wars speech. Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. Wow, LaRouche, coming for LaRouche's, greatest achievement right there.
Yeah, wow.
Unless he was hanging out with those people too.
Yes. Actually, I didn't realize how incredibly sus Stranger in Strangeland was, because I had completely forgotten, the plot. So, eventually, the Martian founds a Church of All Worlds that combines the Fosterite cult, especially the sexual aspects, which, basically it's a populist megachurch in which sexuality, gambling, alcohol consumption, and similar activities are allowed and even encouraged, and considered sinning only when they are not under church auspices. So the Martian combines elements of that with Western esotericism, and the members of the religion learn the Martian language and thus acquire the ability to truly grok the nature of reality, granting them psychokinesis. Eventually, the church is besieged by Fosterites for blasphemy, and the church building is destroyed, but unknown to the public, Smith's followers teleport to safety. Smith is arrested by the police, but escapes and returns to his followers, later explaining to Jubal that his gigantic fortune has been bequeathed to the church. With that wealth and their new abilities, church members will be able to reorganize human societies and cultures. Eventually, those who cannot or will not learn Smith's methods will die out, leaving Homo Superior. That, incidentally, may save Earth from eventual destruction by the Martians, who were responsible for the destruction of the fifth planet aeons ago, resulting in the asteroid belt.
Phaeton. Wow.
Yeah, Phaeton. It's also implied at the end that Smith was an incarnation of the Archangel Michael, or a different Archangel.
Wow. It's amazing how well regarded this guy is, and how revered he is for how sus his politics are. I mean, it also sounds like he's creating he's talking about the Grateful Dead or something. All kinds of, when you go to the Dead show, all kinds of, indulgences and libertinistic behavior is allowed to be unleashed, and they're mixing Western esotericism with, I don't know. It's weird. Very weird. Sus. Yeah, so I think maybe we'll add him to the list, because I didn't realize he was he was in policy circles in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, he's a super influential sci-fi writer. That book, Stranger in Strangeland, I remember was the number one recommended sci-fi book when I was a kid that people would always encourage you to read if you were into science
some people have called it the Bible of the American counterculture in the 1960s.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly who were the ones who were the kind of famous people that were really, really obsessed with it. But I think it's kind of every sus person that you can imagine. Oh, okay, yeah. Ronald Reagan admired him, and so did Charles Manson, who was captured with the novel Stranger in a Strange Land in his backpack. He predicted the European Union and invented the waterbed. Wow, he invented the waterbed. That's I'm just reading from a LA Times article about him. I guess he is kind of a polarizing sci-fi person. But let's see. Yeah, somebody said, here at the store, I actively resist promoting him because he was a fascist, said Charles Howther, the science fiction buyer at Skylight Books. People don't seem to talk about him anymore. I haven't had a conversation about Heinlein in a long time. Still, hardcore admirers remain. David Silver, the Venice-based president of the 800-member Heinlein Society, discovered the author's work as a boy in the 50s in a gifted children program. No, I'm just kidding. And said he rereads about 4 dozen of Heinlein's books every year. Okay, sounds sus, but his following shows up in unexpected places. He's the hero of numerous astronauts, Silicon Valley types, and those seeking to privatize space travel. He isn't just their favorite writer, he set them on their life's course. He generated public enthusiasm for the space race, inspired the genre called military science fiction. Tom Clancy, Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, and countless libertarians are fans. A crater on Mars is named for him. And I guess let me see. Yeah, he was in LA and Santa Cruz most of the time. He actually campaigned for Upton Sinclair for governor in the 30s, who was a socialist. So I don't know if this is another Trotsky to Fash pipeline kind of thing going on, but a lot of more progressive sci-fi authors kind of hate him. Yeah, even Stranger, with its countercultural following and endless debates about alternative sexuality, it's one of the several of his books to dramatize group marriages, enrages feminists these days. It's like the sexist model of hippie life. We're all liberated, but the women still get the coffee. That definitely resonates with like the Jimmy Page groupie kind of. Oh, we're so liberated, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he apparently was really into Uspensky. Gurdjieff's sort of. Yeah.
Oh, this is the one I remember. The one that I remember reading about a lot is "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress." That was apparently very kind of influential, and that's about like a workers' revolt on the moon.
Right.
It was written in 1966, right at the dawn of like
the base libertarians like rebel on the moon, right?
Yeah. It's basically it's like a kind of like an Ayn Rand but sci-fi sort of thing about a libertarian
there
uprising.
Ain't no such thing as a free lunch, which all the moon people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, where the loony but it's also I think it was kind of perceived as like basically a kind of almost like automated like virtual anarchist utopia.
It's kind of like like a based like new America that like declares independence from like the stupid Earth with their being libtards,
exactly. And it's there's a lot of like kind of I don't know revolutionary or perhaps counter-revolutionary like conspiring like clandestine networks and covert cells that are run by I guess like the main guy who launches this kind of like this putsch or this coup. He's kind of and actually going with a lot of things that we've talked about recently. Lunar society is portrayed as akin to that of the Old West, tempered by the closeness of death, by exposure to vacuum, and by the shortage of women. Because the sex ratio is about 2 men to each woman, the result is a society where women have a great deal of power, and any man who offends or touches a woman uninvited is likely to be attacked and eliminated through the nearest airlock. Marriages tend to be polyandrous, including group marriages, and antisocial individuals were selectively eliminated. And I don't know, there's something that should put people out of the airlock, I guess, if they're bad. And then there's an unregulated free market. It fucking rules. And I guess this is also bizarre. I guess it's also in Stranger in a Strange Land, where a band of social revolutionaries form a secretive and hierarchical organization. In this respect, the revolution is more reminiscent of the Bolshevik October Revolution than the American, and this similarity is reinforced by the Russian flavor of the dialect and Russian place names such as Novi Leningrad. Interesting. He introduced the idea of a line marriage in this book, where like they're part of a century-old line marriage wherein new spouses are introduced by mutual consent at regular intervals so that the marriage never comes to an end.
Weird. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like century-long bloodlines and things like that. Very interesting.
What? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. He's sus. But maybe we'll put him on the thing.
Super reactionary. But we can definitely return to Robert Heinlein.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a lot there to talk about. It would be interesting to do more into the sort of sci-fi, because there really is so much there. He alone could be a whole episode, but there's really a lot, and we haven't really gotten in so much to. We've done a lot of UFO stuff. We haven't gotten in so much to the science fiction side of things. Yeah.
We haven't, but it's something I think we've naturally I think we've naturally discovered it in many of our episodes, that these sus sci-fi authors just keep popping up in the strangest places, and it doesn't seem. I guess
fiction has become it's become really like the standard like salient new teleology for how people imagine the future. That is what people think is the future is going to be, is the future that was imagined in science fiction by American science fiction writers mostly, like. That we're all going to go colonize the stars, that, we're going to settle on the moon. Like, all this stuff has been laid out before us by the imaginations of science fiction writers. And, they're, like, Elon Musk, like, he is someone who obviously is influenced by that. These people, here's to the weird ones, the freaks and the dreamers, or whatever, that's...
That's where you really see the military-industrial complex and like the deadhead, like the deadhead ethos and like the aerospace industry kind of coalescing into this like singular being. That,
and then we'll all become gods, and we'll outgrow these silly superstitions, and we'll possibly we'll slaughter some alien race that's out there, so that we can all come together and integrate into a global economy.
It'll be great.
Based on the blockchain.
Yeah, based on the blockchain. Exactly. Okay, so we can move to number 10. Do you want to read that?
Yeah, sure. Loving the New Regime asks, you think Idris Elba and Tom Hanks really had COVID? Maybe. I mean, like, yeah, probably they did. I mean, people can have COVID and just recover from it, right? I mean, it could have been a psyop, but yeah, for the most part. I mean, I feel like the opposite is true, where it's not, like, you know, if people, for instance, like African leaders who have mysteriously died of COVID when you'd think that maybe they would be able to recover. That I feel like maybe they didn't really have COVID, whereas like Tom Hanks and Idris Elba did. I actually heard something really amazing, not about Tom Hanks, but about his son, Chet Hanks. Yeah, my girlfriend told me this because she was watching an episode of Impulsive or something, which I guess is like Logan Paul's podcast or show, you know, or Jake Paul or something, with Chet Hanks on it. And Logan Paul was like, bro, you know, people think like you and your dad are in the Illuminati. Well, let's convince them you're not in the Illuminati. And Chet Hanks apparently has like an all-seeing eye tattoo. And he went on at length about how, you know, he's not in the Illuminati. But then after all that, he suddenly pivoted and said that he met a being that like looked like the Mona Lisa. He wouldn't actually say like an ET or anything. He said like it was an entity or like a being, but that, you know, it enlightened him. What? It communicated with him through like feelings or ideas, like not through language, and it enlightened him. And Logan Paul was like, bro, I'm trying to tell people you're not in the Illuminati. I'm trying, like, and he was like, bro, what does Illuminati mean? What does it mean? You know, so it means enlightened, and he was enlightened by this being. So, which and I guess, was, you know, a really crazy thing.
That is really crazy. Yeah, I hadn't heard of it. I'm trying to look it up now, and there's like a lot of stuff about like no, Chet Hanks isn't in the Illuminati, talking about how he basically, like he he tells of his out-of-body experience. You can only find it like on Reddit, but it's all just about like how he debunked the silly rumors that, you know, basically that he's doing. Yeah, he said he gave like an angry, like a rage out against people who he slams the ridiculous rumors. This is in March of like last year, so actually around the same time that Tom Hanks like got COVID. Interesting. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but yeah, he went on to
and gave Tom Hanks COVID, and he gave Chet Hanks the seal of the Illuminati.
Yeah, I guess he had posted an earlier video where he satirized being discovered as a member of the Illuminati, but then people, I guess, started asking him, and he said. He posted, you motherfuckers are going to believe what you want because you're already so fucking committed to your weird internet conspiracies, but I'm not actually in the fucking Illuminati, dude. I was trolling in that last video, obviously, because I'm pissed off at what you motherfuckers are fucking saying about my family. The ridiculous, sick fuck shit that you guys like to sit around and fucking think about is fucking disgusting. I think he's basically probably alluding to the fact that people think that like Tom Hanks is a pedo, or that he sacrifices children, or that... You know, it is interesting how Tom Hanks has acquired kind of this duality of being like the nice guy that can do no wrong, but other people think that he's absolutely like the most evil actor in Hollywood.
I think it's because at first like people held him up as being the nice guy who could do no wrong, so obviously as a result of that, people started to think that he was like the leader of the cabal, you know, that he was like Q's number one arch enemy.
Yes, he definitely
smuggle Hillary to the moon, or to the into the tunnels underneath the earth, in the buggies. You know,
exactly. And I mean, I guess like a lot of it was, I forget when it really. I think it was kind of, you know, somewhere in the like the transition period between like Pizzagate and QAnon, but also like Me Too, like when all those things were kind of like swirling around, like people kind of came out with that. I mean, I guess he was in like the Da Vinci Code, which is like a little bit kind of sus, you know, and also
I read something funny about that, which is that he thought he was going to be playing Leonardo da Vinci, but instead he had to play like Professor Robert Langdon, like the badass symbologist who, like, you know, uses his intuition to. But I don't know if that's true. I had heard that that might just be like a rumor, but
I mean, it's kind of like we don't know kind of like what I mean, I know Tom Hanks, like myself, is from the East Bay. You know, I think he grew up in like Oakland or something, and I forget if he had. Yeah, I mean, he didn't come from. I don't think he came from, you know, some kind of fancy connected family or whatever. I guess he was kind of like an evangelical. He didn't. It's kind of weird. Like Tom Hanks, like I mean, that's the other thing maybe why people don't really suspect him is because he kind of like scrapped his way up from kind of just being like a nobody dude and like gradually.
Yeah, I mean, he also just like seems like a nice guy. You know, he has that kind of, I guess, you know, to some. Like, I obviously don't feel any feelings towards Tom Hanks, but, you know, he has that kind of affect that a lot of people have. It's like, hey, yeah, hey, man, you know, so...
Okay, wait a minute. All right, I have an alert. Okay, there is something. It's probably not what, like, QAnon people want to hear in terms of susness, but I did not know this, that Tom Hanks practices transcendental meditation and participates in charity dinners for veterans victims of post-traumatic stress disorder organized by the David Lynch Foundation with Mary Louise Parker. He says, oh, wow, and... yeah, he says, I guess, like, I used to crumble between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7. I mean, I was no good for anything. I couldn't read. I couldn't talk on the phone. I couldn't do any work. It was really an unproductive 4 hours. And now with meditation, it's the most productive hours of my day. What? Okay. I mean, that's a weird, like, pitch for transcendental meditation. It's like, there are 4 hours during the day where I can't function in the middle of the afternoon. And now I meditated and I'm so productive. Sounds very spiritual.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just, probably not damning for most people, though, who don't know about the susness of transcendental meditation, but it's sus. But all these celebs do it. David Lynch loves it. Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, strike two. I found strike two. Okay, this is sus. Because, you know, we almost forget that, you know, he was in one of the biggest blockbusters of the 90s, Apollo 13. You know, about our glorious space program. And so, you know, he's a big supporter of NASA since I think then. And he said that he originally, you know, when he was a kid, he wanted to be an astronaut. But here we go. Hanks is a member of the National Space Society, serving on the board of governors of the nonprofit educational space advocacy organization founded by Wernher von Braun.
Wow.
Cool.
Yes,
all right, we got a little von Braun connection. I have read about this before. It almost goes back to Heinlein too, the Institute of like Noetic Sciences, and I think this came. Yeah, it merged with the National Space Institute, which was von Braun's organization, and the L5 Society, which was founded by Gerard K. O'Neill, who I think created the O'Neill sphere kind of concept of like orbital space colonies. Yeah, I guess these guys are just a cool charity that produces cool things to support space development. Just something a good guy would do, you know, I guess.
Yeah, just normal cool stuff. Yeah, agreed.
Lots of people have gotten the, oh my God, okay, this is too good. They give out every year, the Robert A. Heinlein Memorial Award.
Wow.
And let's see, some of the winners of the Robert A. Heinlein Memorial Award in past years have been Gerard O'Neill. I'm actually reading let me just read like the first like 10. Wow. So from 1986 on, Gerard O'Neill, Arthur C. Clarke, Dr. Wernher von Braun, Gene Roddenberry, Robert Goddard, Buzz Aldrin, Carl Sagan, Neil Armstrong, Robert Zubrin, Captain James Lovell, I think, moon guy, right? He was the guy Tom Hanks played, right? Yeah, James Lovell.
Maybe, I don't know.
Then Chuck Yeager, Stephen Hawking, 2014, Elon Musk, and then Jerry Pournelle. And Jerry Pournelle, who I guess is very Jerry Pournelle is the guy who's obsessed with fucking Robert Heinlein and like runs that society and reads like 40 Robert Heinlein novels every year, I believe.
Wow.
The guy who I joked about, like he found out about him in a gifted children program.
Yes, right.
So wow. He had a PhD in psychology, sus. Anyways, he was introduced to Malthusian principles and liked them, I guess.
Dope.
And Oh my God. Okay, so Elon Musk, like everybody's down. Oh my God, they also have the NSS von Braun Award. Yay. And so the winners of that include nobody really that we know, but Elon Musk won that in 2009, so pretty far back. That's given an odd number of years.
Gotta collect all those von Braun awards. I just want
gotta get that von Braun award.
Named after von Braun, yes.
So I think it's really cool that Tom Hanks is serving on the board of this fantastic organization that is going to, basically...
he definitely wants, like, the first ticket on the spaceship to the Nanai Cloud Society.
He's going to go... he wants to go to Mars in a bucket. He wants to go to Mars in a bucket real bad. He wants to go on a mission to Mars in a bucket.
Yes, he definitely does. Was he in Mission to Mars? No, right?
No, that was Gary Sinise, who was in, Forrest Gump with him. But, so as far as him faking having COVID, I feel like it's a little bit kind of not. It's irrelevant to the question of whether or not he was psyoping us, which I think my answer would be maybe he was, because he was one of the first people to really it was a big deal, like one of the biggest celebrities to get COVID over in Australia and kind of encourage everybody to, I don't know, stay home and lock down and all these other things. And, it was just one little part. I do remember, wasn't there a little bit of like susness about Idris Elba kind of saying he had COVID, but then he like got COVID again later and they were like, wait, did you not have it the first time? I forget if there's something going on with Idris Elba kind of that was a little dodgy in that, like, either he wasn't telling people or he was saying it, but like didn't have it. I forget. But again, I would assume that, like maybe he talked about, he thought he was going to die following his COVID-19 diagnosis, and he's humbled to be alive, and he recovered. I guess he says he had a bad reaction to it. So, and he's talked a lot about how, it was very traumatic and everything. So, but also like, getting COVID and just watching TV every day last year could almost like psyop you into being more traumatized by the experience of getting it than if you just got, you know what I mean? I think, as we talked about, the mind is very powerful, has a lot of influence over the body. And if you get this thing that like,
there definitely were people who like psyop themselves into having COVID, like people who just would endlessly test negative, but would be certain that they had it.
Yeah, like, no, I can feel it, exactly.
Yeah, like, wasn't Julia Ioffe like that, or Julia Ioffe?
Oh, probably, yeah, and, like, Putin gave it to her, personally. Something like that. But, so, I don't know, but the fact that
Tom Hanks, pretty sus.
Oh, big psyop, total propaganda. Like, even in my less woke state in, like, 2007, I felt a little bit weird about that movie, and the more I think back, and I haven't watched it in years, but it's somehow, like, even more egregious than Rambo 3.
Joint, right? Yeah.
So. And Mike Nichols, too, Mr. New Hollywood, Day of the Dolphin.
Right.
So he's
right.
Stranger.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, and it's funny that, like, in all the stuff we've read about Operation Cyclone and the Afghan War and stuff, like, Charlie Wilson's name doesn't even come up in, like, most of the narrative. Like, it's so weird that this became a story that was presented to us of, like, this is how the whole covert involvement in Afghanistan thing went down through this, like, probably, I think there probably were even, like, sus Texas connections, because that guy was a Texas Democrat who was all plugged in. I remember there were all these, like, rich, like, Houston oil widows or whatever, like Julia Roberts, that were always giving him money to like buy weapons for the Mujahideen. And like that's kind of played as like, oh, it's so wacky, like he's a Democrat but he's like taking money from billionaires to like arm Contras. And it just kind of like didn't interrogate any of that shit, and then just says like, because we didn't build schools at the end, that's why 9/11 happened.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, yeah.
Oh boy, yeah. So
we're abandoning them, yeah.
Yeah, we're abandoning them, exactly. So Tom Hanks. I mean, he's also in the U.S. Army Ranger Society or something like that for, I think, playing for Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, and the first actor to be inducted, you know, in the U.S. Army Rangers Hall of Fame, and I guess I don't know, maybe the only one, but yeah, he's got some sus kind of stuff going on, you know. I think time will tell, you know, if more comes out.
Yeah.
His son does seem to be off the rails, so I don't know, you know. His first son seems so normal. It seems like that's what Tom Hanks' son would be like, Colin Hanks. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But now.
Yeah, but Chet, no, he's a different beast.
Well, watch out. White Boy Summer is maybe a blue beam operation, so
you're right.
Maybe he's talking about Nordics. Yeah. The summer of the Nordics.
We'll
the
see.
tall whites
We'll see.
are coming.
Yeah, the 12-foot tall whites.
Tall white summer was the original TikTok, but then his handlers canceled that and they rebranded it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well,
it's interesting that it looked like the Mona Lisa, the entity, you know, drawn by Da Vinci.
That's very odd.
Da Vinci,
Da Vinci Code. Oh shit. Whoa. Wow. That I would imagine that would be, even if we're just talking about his subconscious or hallucination, that would kind of make sense. Is like, oh, your dad starred in that movie franchise about how there's a code in the Mona Lisa. It's the most, you know, recognizable kind of thing about that movie. And then Mona Lisa comes to you. I don't even know what's going on. And, you know.
I mean, Mona Lisa kind of looks like a gray wearing a mask a little bit.
She does have a little bit of alien kind of. Yeah.
She definitely does. She's got definitely a vibe. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Might be a toy.
More of a gray, but could be a toy too.
Yeah. Okay, well,
all right.
We can move on to the next one. Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
Okay, I'll read it. Yeah, so from Future Shock. What's the deal with ISIS? I want to hear the SJ take on the susness, occultness, Dracularity of ISIS. Do you think the group forming was natural at all or completely manufactured? Also, what's your take on the idea of the CIA encouraging ISIS and YPG recruitment at the same time, with YPG recruitment being somewhat in the open and ISIS recruitment being more occulted? You guys have touched on this a bit, but I want to hear more of a deep dive on the susness of ISIS specifically.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of susness to ISIS. Yeah. I think that the fact that there was ISIS and YPG recruitment at the same time, that definitely is true. And I think that those two things obviously fueled each other because it made it heroic to go fight for Rojava. People forget that many of the people who went to go fight for the YPG, some people maybe on the left tend to overlook that a lot of the people who went to go fight for the YPG weren't doing it because they were based leftists. They were doing it because they wanted to murder ISIS. They were doing it because they wanted to save Christians, or they wanted to
save
kill
Yazidis.
Muslims. And ISIS, they are a bad group, obviously, and if you are someone who hates Islam and you want to massacre Muslims, obviously that's a great opportunity for you because you can just go and slaughter them and you don't really get to feel guilty about it and no one's really going to stop you. But it doesn't make you a hero, it makes you a psychopath. It's a very deranged thing. But I think that those two things, the brutality of ISIS and the heroism of the Kurds, and even a sub-dialectic of that being the idea of their amazing leftism and the democratic confederalism that they were building in Rojava, was definitely part of that.
Yeah, and I remember following all that stuff in real time, particularly when it really burst on the scene in June 2014, when ISIS invaded Iraq and started, drove the Yazidis out of their land. And remember, there was a mountain that all the Yazidis were trapped on, and suddenly everyone was talking about our responsibility to protect, and then, maybe still wasn't quite enough. But then, then they released those videos that, and I'll say right here, back then, because I've mentioned before, I was writing this TV pilot back then that had to do mostly with drone warfare, but I kind of decided to pivot to this setting after I watched it erupt in real time because it was, I don't know, it was fresh. It was fascinating. There were so many layers of just craziness to it. And I don't know. And of course, it eventually did involve like a huge amount of drone warfare going into like northern and eastern Syria and northern Iraq as well. You know, in a variety of ways. But like, I remember those videos, and like, I was one of those people that when like Rita Katz, because it was always Rita Katz, okay, which is so sus, but it was always her that managed to like quote unquote find the ISIS execution video. And usually you could kind of get it for a little while, but then as more and more of those videos came out over the months, that was actually an interesting instance of like the media being like, we can't show this, and it kind of just got deleted from the internet. And like, you basically, they would just show you like one single screenshot from it. But like, I watched them and I saw other ISIS. I saw their kind of propaganda videos. I've mentioned before, their aesthetics were so sophisticated and flashy. And I'm not trying to be like kind of an Orientalist of like, oh, like some Arabs couldn't make cool videos. But like, there's a certain look and a style and a production quality that was not present with like Al Qaeda in the 2000s. That this group all of a sudden had in spades. And it was suspicious. What?
Yeah, it was a bit.
Oh, you mean you agree? You mean you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that there was a change in production quality. I wouldn't necessarily say that that is inherently what is suspicious about it, but
no. There's so many other things, but like that was one thing that jumped out to me. Then the videos. I saw the James Foley video. I had watched it. I watched the real thing, and it was always talked about in the media as like this gruesome, disgusting, horrible, basically snuff film where they cut this guy's head off. But they actually don't show that in the video. And so, and this is true for, I think, the 4 American hostages that they executed in very similar, the Jihadi John, just a perfect supervillain, like Cobra Commander, right? That basically executed all these guys. But, you know, and people, kind of conspiracy type people said at the time that, like, what's up with these videos? I think this is fake. I think that they didn't actually...
People definitely said they were fake.
Yeah, people did say they were fake. And I have to say, because there were other videos where, unfortunately, from my viewing eyes, were not fake. And you know what was interesting? Those videos were usually them killing Shiites or Yazidis or captured Syrian army soldiers. So basically Arabs, you know, or Kurds sometimes. But really, it was like whenever they got like an American, like a white American person, they did this weird thing. It was like, it was a different, it's like it might have been on a soundstage somewhere underground, but made to look like it was outside in the desert. It seemed to be like maybe Jihadi John was standing in front of a green screen, which, you know, is something that they could obviously set up pretty easily, but it just had this weird quality, and it was also not as good quality as the other videos that they were releasing, like Flames of War and like the Breaking of the Barriers and you know,
I remember Flames of War,
the Clashing of the Swords series, the Rafida Hunters. Like, they really had a whole like MTV thing they were pumping out of all these different like exciting, flashy war crimes footage that but then when they did these videos, they were different. And then it's like, as soon as they would go to like cut their necks, unlike the Daniel Pearl video or the who is it, like David Berg, those 2 guys who got beheaded in the 2000s, it then like fades away as they, just when he starts cutting his neck, and then it like dissolve cuts to him lying on the ground with like his head, his chopped off head, like posed on his chest. And that was like the standard way they would do it. And it just felt like, you know, I mean, people even like in the mainstream media speculated that perhaps there was some kind of weird setup to this where like they told the hostages that you have to like, we're going to do a mock execution video. So you have to say this statement and act like this. And if you do it, like, we won't actually kill you. And then they like killed them later. But that kind of seems kind of weird. Like, why would you do that? Like, maybe it's just, or maybe he's, but there's no sign of them struggling. Honestly, they look drugged. And I mean, God, remember John Cantley?
Yes, John Cantley.
Poor John Cantley. Poor John Cantley. Oh,
whatever
John
happened
can't
to him?
lie. I don't know. I think, you know, anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, I think he was a British journalist. I think he was working freelance. I forget who he was actually working for, but he got kidnapped.
Oh, he escaped. He's out now.
Really?
Yes.
No way. Yeah, he was a British war photographer. Okay, he was kidnapped with James Foley in 2012. And also the weird thing about James Foley had a very kind of like undercover CIA vibe about him. And he had worked for a kind of strange, very kind of obscure like online news website. I think it was called like Global Post. Yeah, Global Post, which was based in Boston. So he went to Libya to cover the uprising against, Muammar Gaddafi, and then, ended up going to Syria and trying to like embed himself with like the Free Syrian Army or something. He was in Afghanistan embedded with the US like special operations forces and stuff. And Kroll Incorporated, that was run by like the dad of Nick Kroll, was hired to hunt him down and like rescue him from ISIS. But yeah, I don't know. That was just very weird. Like, so people suspected maybe this almost seemed like a weird like front outlet, the Global Post thing, and they kind of got called out after James Foley was killed about kind of like sending in unsupported personnel into like war zones. But all these people were kind of floating around doing like quote unquote freelance like war journalism. But then everybody forgets like that literally was what caused Obama to like send in the special ops and the drones and start airstriking Syria. It was like the back door to the red line. It's like, okay, we can't I guess muster the support to attack Assad directly or do a no-fly zone, but if there's like a genocide and then one of our cool liberal journalists like gets kidnapped and beheaded, then
he had to make like ISIS propaganda videos.
Yeah, and then his friend has to make like ISIS, like Vice, like Cribs videos kind of about how like stupid Obama is and how like the Islamic State's going to win and how they might execute him any moment. Like it was really dark, like kind of what they, unless maybe you think, okay, because then if you want to get more critical paranoid about it,
John Cantley actually, he was rescued earlier. That's what I was reading because I just Googled him. For some reason, this was like reported as recent news. He was rescued earlier, but then I guess he was recaptured. Yeah, so he was first kidnapped by... It's amazing that this guy constantly gets kidnapped. But yeah, he was kidnapped earlier in 2012 and rescued. Then he was kidnapped again, and then he was in a bunch of ISIS videos. But the British security minister stated that Cantley is believed to still be alive.
Yeah, they said the last they heard of him, I guess, from the based Syrian Democratic Forces, said they thought he might still be alive inside Deir ez-Zor, inside Syria. Mm-hmm. Yeah, weird. So that's eerie because, also his sister said that she thinks that he believes 2/3 of what he says in the videos, which are basically like constantly criticizing the U.S. and the British and criticize like their hostage policy, comparing it unfavorably to other European countries. And yet I remember the Lend Me Your Ears series that he started releasing. I watched all of these like when they dropped because it was so bizarre. I mean, that was kind of during the siege
like most
of Kobani.
Of what, I mean, that's how you do good propaganda. I mean, that's basically what, not to demean Russia, but that's what RT is. They obviously like, or even what AJ Plus kind of is. Their criticism is very cynical, but a lot of it is correct. Or, Al Jazeera English in general,
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of the CIA origins, we've talked a little bit about it. It's kind of murky, but we do know that a lot of the people that, ended up in the kind of the Iraqi leadership of ISIS were, people that were thrown into places like Camp Bucca during the Iraq War in the 2000s, and some of whom were tortured at places like Abu Ghraib, even if they weren't literally there. And also, I do remember that the circumstances under which Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was released from Camp Bucca were always very hazy, and there were conflicting stories in like mainstream news about what had actually happened. Like, was he released on an amnesty, or did he cut a deal? Like and there was like some story about how when he was like walking out of the gates after they released him in like 2008, he said to the guards like, "See you in New York," or something like that. Right. It kind of just sounds like a little bit of like lore building. I mean, also the person that he succeeded in the sort of Islamic State of Iraq organization, I'm forgetting his name right now. It was like it was maybe like Abu Omar al-Baghdadi, but there's still disagreement over whether or not he even existed. And of course, he was, I believe, the successor.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi?
No, Abu Omar. Abu Omar. I believe it's Abu Omar al-Baghdadi. And of course, he was a successor to, oh my God, the main dude, Zarqawi? Yeah, sorry. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi,
Zarqawi.
who was the leader of the kind of the organization that ended up being, basically the Mujahideen Shura Council, kind of the coalition of sort of Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, and he was killed in an airstrike in 2006, and then it kind of came out of the same organization. And then Abu Omar al-Baghdadi was the leader from 2006 2010. And at least a couple years ago, when I was kind of researching him, if you look on Wikipedia, it's this mugshot of a man believed to be Abu Omar al-Baghdadi. So they have some information about him, but there's a controversy over his identity. In 2007, U.S. military spokesman General Kevin Bergner claimed that Abu Omar al-Baghdadi did not actually exist, and that all of his audio statements were actually read by an elderly Iraqi actor. And the detainee, identified as Khalid al-Mashhadani, a self-proclaimed intermediary to Osama bin Laden, claimed that al-Baghdadi was a fictional character created to give an Iraqi face to a foreign one group. In March 2008, the spokesman for a rival insurgent organization, Hamas Iraq, also claimed that al-Baghdadi was a fabrication made by al-Qaeda to put an Iraqi face on their organization. However, U.S. military officials later came to believe the position of al-Baghdadi had been backfilled by an actual commander. So
the commander was the U.S. military officials.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a weird thing going on like throughout this whole thing of like what kind of nefarious like CIA or military involvement did how far did it go back with the kind of the group that would become ISIS? Obviously, the military was fighting them, but there seemed to be all these games going on, and I almost see it as like the opportunity for like the insurgency to develop, like a kind of Sunni Islamist insurgency to develop in Iraq when we invaded, almost gave them a whole new like an ocean of new recruits that they could like ensnare into places like Abu Ghraib, or I mean at the bare minimum, I don't know, make them like informants of some kind, or eliminate them, or maybe do some experiments on them, which is what it totally sounded like. Basically, that's what was going on in Abu Ghraib. I mean, they were doing like horrible, like Phoenix program type, like psychological, trying to psychologically break people, learned helplessness, all these like. So basically, we're right up to the edge of like MK Ultra shit, and then so much about ISIS feels like a both like satanic and some kind of MK Ultra like Phoenix army of like sadistic killers that really is using kind of like the Kinney Parking Corporation like wearing Warner Brothers face as a mask. It's like they're wearing this like Islamic jihadi face, but the actual thing that's driving it, contrary to what Graham Wood might say, actually it's related to Islam in the fact of its aesthetic representation and kind of what it claims about itself, but it's not actually rooted. Would you agree with that in, serious Islamic doctrine?
It's really hard to say. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, the Graham Wood idea is that ISIS is like deeply scholarly and based on, a deep engagement with like the Islamic intellectual tradition, which is absolute bullshit. Like, that's not remotely true, or that like they have an understanding of like the rules of the fiqh of jihad and things like that. Like, no, like that's not true. Like most of like the ulama like that still exist, like we still have like learned scholars of Islam and the Islamic tradition like have repudiated ISIS like on fiqh grounds. Like, it's not, that whole idea is like outrageous and just like complete fraud. And there's a lot of stuff like that kind of journalistic charlatanism around ISIS as well. That is like a whole other thing. Like the whole thing with the Caliphate, the award-winning New York Times podcast about ISIS, where it turns out like one of their sources was just like completely lying about ever having been in ISIS. And the woman who did it, I remember reading some amazing, the woman who was like the producer of it, I remember reading some article about her. She was in Mali, and she was like, I was looking at all these papers that I guess had scattered, I was seeing in these markets, and, I saw that some were in Arabic, and I thought, they speak French in Mali, but anything that's Arabic, that is inherently some kind of foreign invasion, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you like what? Like, that's the mind that you have, because people don't know anything, and ever since 9/11, they're just complete fools who are working this beat who don't know anything about anything. But they just like say, they like adjust their glasses and say it in this pedantic voice, and then people take it. You know, I'll be haunted forever by like seeing like some Hillary bot on Facebook like retweeting that Graham Wood article and saying like required reading, kiddies. Like, shut up. Like, and that was all nonsense. All nonsense. The idea of the, like, you know, very Islamic, you know, and that I think is part of the psyop of ISIS. Like, do I think, you know, to Future Shock's question, do I think the group forming was natural at all or completely manufactured? I think that it was, in some respects, natural, because the area of Iraq and Syria was completely destabilized by the invasion of Iraq. And there definitely was a lot of more indirect political causes for the situation to worsen and worsen in a group like ISIS, you know, which is who pride themselves on their brutality to emerge in that environment that absolutely is, in some respect, like, quote unquote natural. It's not really natural, but you know what I mean. Like, you know, it's not like,
I would say it was natural to the extent that I do believe that they leveraged kind of a relationships or a kind of tenuous alliance with some of the Sunni tribes in the sort of northwestern region of Iraq, who had, you know, like you said, like, due to the destabilizing effects of like the U.S. invasion, you know, not kind of in a difficult spot where basically the majority was kind of running the government, and they felt kind of slighting them, and basically that, you know, maybe in places like Fallujah or places like Mosul, that, you know, certain kind of like local authorities kind of allowed ISIS to come in if it was going to kind of kick out their enemies, that kind of thing. And then I don't know, but like that would be kind of the extent of like, oh, it's like super organic. It's like they leveraged like Sunni Shia tensions, and then also the total chaos of the Syrian war, which is like, you know, they kind of invaded early on, and they were in the al-Nusra front, kind of this broad alliance with sort of traditional Al-Qaeda, which was getting CIA support. So they were getting CIA support and probably Turkish support and Gulf state support, you know, from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and places like that. And then, you know, when they split with Al-Qaeda and then went back and invaded Iraq, it did feel like something that was like, oh, gee, like, first of all, now we have to militarily recommit to, like, we basically have to, like, re-enter Iraq properly to fight these guys. Second, they're countering in kind of the most vicious way possible Iranian influence in you know, Iraq by basically like going through and kind of like trying to like genocide Shias, and basically they took over almost half the country for a while. You know, they got all the way down to like Ramadi and Tikrit and Fallujah, like almost got to, I remember when they were posting on Twitter like Baghdad in the distance and like bomb smoke like rising, and they were like one, you know, one finger emoji. Like, hashtag witness.
One finger emoji. I do feel like some of the like successes of ISIS, there was also some exaggeration of that.
Yes, like I think also like the military pulled out in a lot of cases.
Participated in the you know, in perpetuating the idea of ISIS as like this civilizational threat, and like we all had to hear about how they were coming for Rome or what, you know, something like that. You know, like they were gonna do attacks here, and every time like a Muslim did something insane, like it was ISIS. You know, it like literally was ISIS. I mean, ISIS claimed, well, the Stephen Paddock thing. ISIS was a claim, you know, claiming that.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, so.
And we did get those lone wolf. We got those lone wolf ones, which like I tracked a lot of them, and they were all quite sus. And that was also something that was kind of new, and now in a way is kind of normalized because like 4chan shooters kind of operate in the same way. But the idea that these people were not like, they didn't go to Syria and like join ISIS and like go through the training and then go back. I mean, some of them actually kind of did, like the Libyan bomber in Manchester. But, you know, they either went to Libya or Syria and maybe got, you know, training by these Al-Qaeda, ISIS type groups. But in a lot of cases, it was people that hadn't even gone over there. but got kind of brainwashed by ISIS over the internet, and then went out like quote unquote inspired
but I don't even know
by
if
them.
that's really true. Like that's a thing.
Well, think about
that
FBI entrapment, security services entrapping vulnerable people and or maybe like naive like people into doing terrorist stuff. Like that happens all the time, where the FBI basically has an informant online
but
being
I
like,
don't
"Hey
even
kid,
necessarily
want to put
know
a
of
bomb?"
things that like. To me, the biggest ISIS lone wolf thing, I guess there was a San Bernardino shooting, which was another one, but the biggest lone wolf ISIS thing to me was the Pulse shooting, which I really think had nothing to do with ISIS at all, or like Islamic.
I think you're right, and that guy. I mean, that guy's dad. Well, I think it has, it has something to do with ISIS and the fact that his dad was also a Mujahideen CIA asset. So in that sense, he's like part of the same like core tradition of, basically he had this like Voice of America funded TV station that he ran out of Florida and was pictured with like all these congressmen and like senators, and he showed up at a Hillary Clinton rally, I think after the shooting, and he was in the stands right behind her wearing like a big red hat, but it wasn't a MAGA hat, but very bizarre. And he was like super pro Hillary, but like the Sadiq Mateen, like very weird. And then the fact that Omar Mateen had worked for G4S, which is the company that bought out Wackenhut Security, and he had been visited by the FBI multiple times, and was like saying crazy shit at work that was very obvious. And then he had sort of like his secret gay kind of double life, and then he went and shot a gay nightclub. Like there's just so much going on with it. I mean, but in the sense of him being like an operative of ISIS, that seems kind of ridiculous. Like there's a bunch of bizarre shit going on, but the idea that this is just like, oh, and ISIS got us again, like no, and that was used to kind of amp up the counterterrorism rhetoric and all that. Je suis Charlie, remember that?
Yeah,
that was ISIS, right?
I remember.
Yeah. And Bataclan, where the kind of sus the Eagles of death metal were shot up. Their concert got shot up. Remember that?
Yes, right. I'm not even sure if that was ISIS. Definitely Charlie Hebdo was not ISIS.
That might have been Al Qaeda. That might have been Al Qaeda.
Yeah. I'm pretty well. Maybe they did claim. Maybe they did claim ISIS affiliation. I mean, yeah, Al Qaeda definitely was. Charlie Hebdo was Al Qaeda, but did Bataclan? I have to look it up. I don't remember, because I do remember a little bit of ISIS discourse happening at the time, but
everyone put their French flag profiles
for the attack. Two of them
remember
were Iraqis.
Remember the Nice truck bombing, like the Nice truck rampage,
right?
Where
of course, the Nice truck. Yeah,
it killed like 80 people or something.
It was called on right wing Twitter. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Oh, and so interesting. What happens after you get some guy to run a bunch of people down in a resort town? Then they called a state of emergency, and then announced the intensification of French airstrikes on ISIL in Syria and Iraq. So it's like every time they really needed those singular spectacular events, whether it was kind of this video of an American being...
who were they attacking? The Eagles of death metal.
Yeah, who were named as a joke of like, we're the band The Eagles, but of death metal. But they weren't really a death metal band. They were like a super group or something, but kind of weird. And they intensified their airstrikes. So like every time they'd execute another person in a video, or they would have a lone wolf kind of inspired terrorist attack in Europe or America, we would intensify the military kind of invasion basically of Syria, while kind of claiming that we were basically going after... I think in some ways both the media participated, and ISIS was almost had to... Who knows where they got trained and got their ideas, but they have the same type of tactics that a Contra Death Squad or a Phoenix Kill Team or a Mexican drug cartel would have. Which is, Mexican drug cartels are the one that pioneered sending execution videos to people, and kind of well-produced ones, or filming their own raids on rival cartels and stuff like that. So you see a certain continuity of tactics, and it's perfectly designed, to, like you said at the beginning, to dehumanize, to create this dehumanized evil enemy, almost like the bugs in Starship Troopers. ISIS is just so evil.
Nazi zombies, it's
Nazi zombies. And so basically that allows for people to be okay with bombing the shit out of if you're bombing the shit out of these people, cool, right? Because you're stopping genocide, you're helping out Iraq, and all these other things, and you're a good guy. And then, and then you can partner with other groups on the ground. And so I think you do have kind of like a good cop, bad cop thing going on with the YPG and the SDF and ISIS, where the U.S. is in some way giving certain support to both these sides, because they're playing kind of this chess game where they ultimately want the Syrian government to fall, and they want to use ISIS as like an end towards that. And I would imagine probably, in their military planning or whatever, they're not thinking that, okay, we're going to install ISIS and they're going to murder 1 million Alawites. And, they probably think, okay, well, this group will probably we could use them for a while and then maybe kind of like jettison them or just bomb them to hell or split them up or send them somewhere else useful. Maybe send them maybe to Xinjiang or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
it just feels like they were concocted, and even though also joining the YPG then became like a based good moral thing to do, even though some of the stuff I've read about it sounds like, even by people's own admissions,
there were literally
a lot of fucked up people
in the YPG.
Yes.
It was very funny. I saw related
German
to a little bit
biker
of drama
gangs.
that's been going on. Literally to a little bit of drama that's been going on Twitter recently, at least recently as of this recording, between our podcast and some others. Someone was saying something along the lines of, I don't know how controversial this opinion maybe is, but what the Kurds are doing in Rojava is a noble cause, and I admire anyone who goes over there to help. But it's like, okay, so you admire a bunch of like right-wing maniacs, like right sector mercenaries, like
cannibals.
You really admire
let's not forget
who went there, like anyone who went there to help.
Yeah, people who wanted to kill.
Most of the people that you admire are just like bloodthirsty war tourists with emotional problems who want to kill people, just want to kill people. I think when ISIS is something that is like surging and seizing control of towns and seizing territory, like a lot of people get pulled into ISIS, because if you're not in ISIS, then you might die. They might just decide that, you're Rafida, or something like that. They might just
exactly.
Kufar.
Exactly. So there was a lot of coercion too, where when ISIS like rolls into your village, like what are you really supposed to do?
Yeah, and if you're not like, I think that and I'm not even sure to what extent. I mean, ISIS committed a lot of atrocities, and there's it's not in any way acceptable or condonable. But I do think that the difference between what would go on in among these groups that are not to be admired, subliminal jihad only supports a subliminal jihad, not terrorism. But I think that there's like rape and murder in like Al-Qaeda in general. Like, it's a brutal situation. It's basically like a violent gang within like a war zone where people are very desperate and they've been invaded by a brutal occupying power as well. So there's that, and there's also the situation of like deep social tensions at play, like in places like Syria and Iraq. So the difference like of ISIS as being this like super brutal thing, I think that was in comparison to other groups, I think that some of that was maybe window dressing.
Well, I mean, I think that even the concept of like the Free Syrian Army for most of the conflict was kind of window dressing for al-Nusra, and al-Nusra contained a lot of these elements. And I remember videos, of like before ISIS burst into Iraq of like so-called FSA freedom fighters like executing prisoners, like just shooting like 20 people in the back of the head.
Yeah, I mean,
stuff
I'm
like
sure
that.
that happens.
Like really brutal kind of stuff.
Happens.
And then ISIS just took it to an even bigger level. But I don't know, maybe let's talk for a second about, because their videos also got more and more sophisticated and perverse in the ways that they would kill people. Like, remember when they caught that Jordanian pilot? They it was very occulty, basically, where it's like all these guys in like yellow ski masks, like standing, like hundreds of them in like fresh new like U.S. military combat fatigues.
Aren't supposed to punish by fire. That's not allowed. To
or like lower somebody, put them in a car and like lower them into a river and then shoot an RPG at the car so it explodes while they're drowning. Like really twisted, weird shit like that. And And then there's the name ISIS, which just jumps out at you as like it just it chills you a little bit, like ISIS, you know. And also, what is up? Or I remember
the Islamic State. I think was even more powerful. Yeah, ISIS. Obviously the Egyptian goddess Isis, but
but even the confusion of the name,
Islamic State.
The confusion of the name was very bizarre at the beginning. Like the Obama administration's insistence that we are not going to call it ISIS, and it just was weird because everyone colloquially would call it ISIS.
ISIL.
I guess it was some kind of probably like Cass Sunstein like told him it would nudge people towards supporting them if you gave them let them have that cool name.
Yeah.
So ISIL just sounded weird, and then there was a Daesh after a while that was kind of in French. The French and the Kurds seemed to prefer that, and then there was like the Islamic State, did they start calling them IS? I forget. After a while,
IS, short for Islamic State. Yeah,
yes.
That was
but I always thought that ISIL, it was like especially John Brennan was so fanatically committed to calling them ISIL, and I mean Obama was too. But what was he covering up, John?
I feel like ISIL, like because of the way it ends, it sounds like Weasel. It's just like not ISIS is a much catchier name. So I think that might have been the calculus behind it, but. Yeah, there was
and what was I forget what it was in Arabic. It was like a Dawlat Islami or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Dawlat al-Islam, the Islamic State.
Yeah, Dawlat al-Islam. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just I don't know, but ISIS obviously brings up like the goddess, and it just feels like they're almost like a death cult, and that they're going around blowing up.
Islam in my head now.
Oh my god! I should I put a nasheed in this episode? I might. I don't know if I want to boost it, but I don't know about that. I still have a few.
I came upon, I guess this is a pretty old article, but I came upon it pretty recently, which is just called like Why Iraqis Living Under the Islamic State Fear Their Liberators, and it was in WAPO, so it's like pretty normie, not an idea that people in that general world you'd often see them proliferate, the idea that anything is possibly worse than ISIS, but so it just is about most Sunnis don't support the Islamic State. In fact, an overwhelming majority of Iraqi Sunnis oppose the Islamic State. If so many Sunnis oppose the Islamic State, why are they so concerned about the Iraqi army, Shiite militias, and Kurdish Peshmerga working to liberate them? The answer lies in the collective identity that Sunni Iraqis hold, and the sense that their community will not be treated fairly by the Shia-dominated Iraqi government and its allies. This is, I think, a little bit different from this is a different article maybe, but same principle, the idea that it's a lot muddier there in general.
I think these are things that like the sort of NATO and the U.S. national security apparatus were kind of playing with and maybe trying to exploit a little bit. That they knew that there were these pretty heavy tensions going on in between the Sunni North and the Shia South, and with the Kurds as well. And it's like, okay, well, we'll give you a kind of force to like quote unquote liberate you, but it's going to be like basically the most toxic kind of negative version of that force possible, of like Sunni representation possible, and then that's going to give us an excuse to come in and start bombing the shit out of Iraq all over again and Syria, and I mean they basically pounded. I was reading again recently just how hard they pounded Raqqa. So in a way it's like wherever ISIS pops up, we get a license to go in and like reduce the place to absolute rubble. And they never talk about civilian casualties with all their drone strikes that you call in on an iPad, do they?
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter because they're ISIS people. Well, yeah, no, when you're calling in an iPad, your drone strike on the iPad, while you're tweeting from your Lennon Lover account, it doesn't matter because like those are just a bunch of animals that are trying to destroy anarchism. So
worst smelling, I believe the quote was worst smelling men on planet. Arab men were. That's a direct quote.
Oh, okay. Worst smelling men on planet. Cool. Yeah.
On planet.
I bet they spell bad when their flesh has been charred and destroyed by the drone strike that you called on the iPad. But Anyway, yeah, like this is actually the article that I was thinking of. It actually is in Foreign Policy magazine, and it's actually about the SDF. Even though, like, Shiite militias, like, they're not, like, heroic. This is a brutal situation, but apparently there would be, when the SDF came in, a lot of the Arab Sunnis were having, their houses confiscated, and the author says, my friends and I ask each other questions like, is it better for one's house to stay standing or level to the ground? Someone will be mistaken for a Daeshi's house and thus confiscated. The SDF only confiscates ISIS houses, one of my friends replies, but ISIS confiscates hundreds of houses in the course of the last 4 years, another remarks. If the SDF confiscates houses that were initially confiscated by the Islamic State, will they ever be returned to their original owners?
Sounds like some same old settler colonialism going on. Nothing new under the sun. You're moving into like a crazy frontier, and you're dispossessing the native-born residents of that place so that you can scoop up all of the oil underneath the ground, which they've already done now with the help of the SDF.
Yes,
and kind of
like white
ethnically
phosphorus,
cleansed it. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought gas-killing animal Assad was the only one that used white phosphorus.
No, apparently the SDF does as well. Yeah, the author says this.
Cool.
A friend of mine who attempted to move from Raqqa last month, the city of Manbij, an Arab majority city located in Aleppo's eastern countryside, which is under SDF control, with his wife and 4 little daughters, was forced by the SDF into a transit camp on his way. The camp, one of several the group established to conduct background checks for fear of Islamic State infiltration, is located in a fenced-off yard of a cotton storage facility in the town of Ain Issa, 30 miles north of Raqqa. The town was captured in 2015 by the People's Protection Units, the Kurdish forces that forms the backbone of the SDF. The UN Refugee Agency estimates there are 9,000 people hosted in and around the camp. SDF collects IDs of those who leave Raqqa and send them to camps where they are being mistreated, my friend said. They keep people up to 15 days under the sun to film them as being taken care of. We had nothing but bread in the morning. My friend was there for 3 days. He said his family was forced to sleep in their car while he slept on the ground. His group had to protest to get their identification cards back. We were beaten for it, he said. I wish I stayed in Raqqa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not a good, not a good like TripAdvisor review to get. I wish I'd stayed in Raqqa.
Not a good one. This is another amazing one. Ahmad, a middle-aged man who owned a currency exchange shop in Raqqa's Al Mansur Street before fleeing to Manbij, favors the SDF. Under the FSA, I couldn't keep my shop open fearing looting for any reason. Under ISIS, businesses like mine thrived as they protected our properties. You couldn't come to my shop with a pocket filled with $100,000. You wouldn't bother about safety. You could come to my shop with a pocket filled with $100,000. You couldn't bother about safeties. Now under the SDF, it's just as safe, with the exception that we don't have to pay zakat. All right. So I guess he preferred ISIS to the FSA, but he doesn't have to pay zakat.
Wow.
All right, nice.
So it's cool.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah, I'm also reading about the huge. I found a Medium article I knew this is a little bit of a thing, but the huge proliferation of like biker gangs, largely from like Germany, that have gone to fight with the YPG and the SDF. And, they're like the Median Empire Motorcycle Club had, a unit, I think, with the PKK. And let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of like Dutch people. A lot of them do have like Kurdish roots. So, but then there's other people like Hans Schneider, who's in the Median Empire. Christian Bidmore is Austrian. And let's see, No Surrender is a Netherlands-based biker gang founded by Klaus Otto. They'd been in the media for attempted liquidations, i.e. killings of other gang members and criminals, and drug trafficking. A Spanish foreigner, Paco Arellano, has been pictured with several notable leading members of the No Surrender gang, including Hank Kuipers, the then president of this biker gang. And, this is written in like 2018. It's all like it's basically Hell's Angels, kind of, 1%. I think the Mongols sent some people there to fight with both the Peshmerga and the YPG and the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. There's some British ones, and yeah, I mean, it's
there was definitely at least one guy who was like in right sector. Sjord Heger. He was a 24-year-old who participated in the Raqqa offensive. Not only did he fight in Syria, but he had also fought alongside the extreme right-wing militia Pravi sector. He was active on websites with topics like Pure Europe were being discussed. Yeah, so, you know.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, the other thing that just shows you kind of the bizarro nature of all this is, I'm trying to find the article right now. Yeah, this is from 2020, from the EU. There's a bunch of things, actually, from, like, respected think tanks. Ukraine is a safe haven for jihadists. So, you know, thousands of, I guess at this point, thousands of foreign fighters who were fighting for ISIS, a lot of them Chechnyan, went back and were found to be fighting with the right-wing militias like Pravi Sector in Ukraine against, you know, the Russian-backed separatists. And that was happening as recently, or as far back
sure
maybe
that,
as
yeah.
2015,
Yeah.
2016. So there's like an ISIS right sector, kind of Pravi sector, neo-Nazi Ukrainian kind of pipeline going on. It seems that maybe the Chechens are kind of the glue that stitches that together a little bit.
That guy, and I think a couple of other, I'm finding now, you know, just having looked this up, Benjamin Fisher is another one, in addition to Heger. They were YPG fighters.
So you see, like, you know,
yeah,
you
a
see,
lot
like,
of
so you said
Israelis who went there to help.
a lot of
empathize
Israelis
with the, they empathize with the Kurdish cause, seeing it as being similar to, and I think they were right.
Yeah, so like at least a few hundred former fighters of the Islamic Caliphate chose Ukraine for their place to stay after it kind of collapsed in 2017, 2018. You know, this is like same old kind of right wing like rat lines of like these kind of terrorist fighters. I mean, also the big elephant in the room is that the top military commander of ISIS was Abu Omar al-Shishani, who was a Georgian Chechen who, you know, you can look it up, like, if you want. Like, he basically was trained by U.S. Special Forces in the Georgian army in the late 2000s. And then he supposedly, like, went rogue. And, yeah, I see here in the Seattle Times, quote, star pupil, Pied Piper of ISIS recruits, was trained by U.S. Abu Omar al-Shishani, former American-trained NCO in the Special Forces of the nation of Georgia, is now the most important non-Arab figure in the Islamic State group hierarchy. You know, so, like, what's up with that? Did we just lose him? Like, what happened? You know, why is he going to fight with ISIS? And, you know, he's also the kind of guy that would probably fight, you know, I mean, there was that weird invasion in Georgia, like South Ossetia in 2008.
Right, yeah.
And they wanted to, like, the Bush administration wanted Georgia to join NATO or some shit. And that's around the time that he was a young man who got into the army and then was a part of these like joint U.S. Special Forces training program. And they basically, they say, okay, this is kind of interesting. And, you know, they say, according to his ex-comrades in the Georgian military, Batirashvili, his real name, was tapped immediately upon his enlistment to join Georgia's U.S.-trained Special Forces. He was a perfect soldier from his first days, and everyone knew he was a star, said one former comrade, who asked not to be identified because he remains on active duty and has been ordered not to give media interviews about this former colleague. We were well trained by American Special Forces units, and he was the star pupil. None of the people who knew Batirashvili during his military service noted any sort of dedication to Islam or jihadist tendencies, but that's not considered particularly unusual in a country where Muslims tend to adhere to a more moderate strain of Sufi Islam, despite Chechnya's reputation as an incubator of extremism. Quote, Chechens have a reputation as crazy Islamic warriors, but our Islam has always been moderate, according to one Pankisi community and clan leader who's been ordered by the government not to talk about the man many Georgians laughingly refer to as Pankisi's most famous son. That reputation for moderation, however, began to change in the wake of the Chechen Wars, which devastated Chechnya, and by the construction in 2000 of a second mosque to serve the valley's 6 small villages. Now, this is interesting. The new mosque, the community leader said, was built with a donation from Saudi Arabia and, quote, preached a kind of alien Wahhabi-style Islam, not the Sufi-style Islam that had characterized the region for hundreds of years. Quote, it told our people that it was wrong to pray at graves of saints and ancestors, as our people have done for hundreds of years, and even to share our religious rights with our Christian brothers. By the mid-2000s, multiple residents say the situation had split the community mostly by age, with the original Sufi mosque attended by the older members of the community, while the young people were radicalized by the new mosque. This led to significant tensions with police until it was resolved by a revolution almost 1,000 miles away. Quote, they all started leaving for Syria, the community leader said. Things are safer here now because all the radicals, our children, have gone to Syria. American and Georgian intelligence estimates put that number between 150 and 200 young men who have left Pankisi to fight in Syria. Huh. I mean, that's like, so, okay, so, I mean, that's an interesting, like, microcosm example of Saudi Arabia kind of going, and, you know, you can check me if I'm being too, if I'm getting some things wrong, but the idea that, okay, you know, you have the U.S. military there kind of identifying gifted young soldiers to be taken into this, like, U.S. Special Forces training program, and then around 2000, like, right before 9/11, you have Saudi Arabia funding this new mosque for, like, this entire valley, and they come in and preach a kind of alien Wahhabi-style Islam that kind of causes dissension between the older generation and the young kids. And then in this kind of small rural place, like 150 to 200 of these people in Penkisi end up going to fight in Syria, one of them becoming the head military commander of ISIS.
Yeah, I mean, that's a common story. Like, I think that it is something that, you know, in terms of, that's just like Saudi's MO in general, is to fund masajid and just like promote their view of Islam, you know, and try to sort of homogenize their religion with their projects. But, you know, it is a sus thing that goes on, and it definitely does contribute to the politics of the, Muslim world, the Muslim countries. You know, it's a huge factor.
Well, and also, I mean, it does make me think about how this would be a perfect cover if you're going to target certain populations to enlist into a kind of, Wahhabi mercenary army that was going to go around the world and wreak havoc in the countries that you targeted. That, you know, you'd have the military kind of doing its thing with maybe certain military people, but also just like if you had intelligence assets basically inside of these mosques, or they doubled as intelligence assets and they actually had a goal. I'm not saying that's like every Saudi mosque that's ever been built is filled with like secret Wahhabi terrorist recruiters. Definitely not saying that. But in places like this, where it's kind of like the picking is ripe for these type, if you get some people when they're young and kind of get them a little bit hyped up, and, you know, I'm sure the Saudis kind of probably like look down on, you know, Georgian or Chechen people as kind of like not as, you know, important as them. I mean, like, no, their own people aren't as important as them, you know. So the idea of kind of, you know, finding a population where it's like it's poor, it's remote, there's not a lot of opportunities, and you can build a big new institution that does exactly what they did in Pakistan and Afghanistan and kind of regions around that in the 80s, like when the Afghan war was going on, where, you know, like there were those books that were financed by the CIA and maybe like paid for by the Saudis that, you know, were all the math problems in the children's books were like, if you have like 3 grenades and you throw one at like a Soviet invader, like, and martyr yourself, like how many grenades do you have left? You know, it was like literally stuff like that they were teaching kids, like normalizing militant, you know, basically this kind of militant aspect. So I think, you know, we might be looking at kind of like a decades-long project that I think definitely the U.S. is probably the prime driver of, and also involves Saudi Arabia and some of these other countries. I think Israel is like definitely in there somewhere, and I think they've even provided, I think they definitely were providing some kind of covert support to the based Rojava Kurds, I think. Or they definitely were encouraging of that, because they don't like Syria. They'd love to see Syria get balkanized. So, you know, and nobody's looking at them while ISIS is running around. I mean, it also makes Israel kind of look good and like justifies their policies as well. Though I'm not going to go a full like, oh, like ISIS is a Zionist creation. I think it's kind of it's convenient for Zionism to some degree, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, it's convenient, and it also has ideological, like the, well, not ISIS, but the Kurdish self-determination struggle has ideological parallels. But I think that
like maybe we'll move on in a sec. But the last thing I want to say is, like, you know, weren't like so many of the YPG supporters like super about like settlers and Sakai? But then if like you turned around and said that Rojava was doing like a version of settlers colonialism, they would lose their shit. I forget to what extent that discourse even happened, but it more just stands out as like a very odd kind of contradiction of, you know, like the people that are most likely to be obsessed with like everything's a settler or whatever. And well, I mean, I think we mentioned like, you know, that tweet from a while back of somebody posting like, this is what like the liberated map of like America will be. And it was like 500 like micronations. And it's like, Yeah, they just want a world of like a million based Rojavas, all like
They
tiny
do
little
want that.
like, and that who's that
Yes,
convenient
because
for?
they really believe that like Sunnis and Shia are like incapable of living together. They think that every single like tiny faction like can't possibly, because they're fools, because they don't know history. Like they don't know like how recent these things are, and how like they don't understand how. Because a lot of the time, like, their informants, like, their counselors are people like the Saudis who just say, like, whatever is to their benefit, which is just like, well, it's cool that we are, like, funding all of these messages and just, like, undermining, like, cultural heritage sites or discouraging, like, ancient practices of, like, tomb visitation and things like that. Or, not ancient, but venerable.
It's kind of funny that they're almost doing a little bit of like a Xinjiang from like the other angle of being like, your version of Islam isn't enough like ours, so like we're gonna like do these kind of
well, that's exactly actually
we're
they
kind
are
of aggressively
very
try to we're trying to aggressively regulate how you worship your Islam.
A book that I recommend for anyone interested in Xinjiang or in Uyghur Islam is The Sacred Roots of Uyghur History. Not a perfect book, but a very interesting book that talks about basically Sufi-esque practices or saint veneration and tomb visitation among Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Basically, like the tactics the PRC uses to destroy the cultural identity of Uyghurs is exactly the same as what Saudi does in Mecca, in Medina, and anywhere they can, which is destroy like the centers of spiritual life, like the tombs of saints, of Sufi saints. So,
wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And what's even more interesting than that is like if China was so concerned about the threat of a kind of Wahhabi jihadi Islam that was going to stoke separatism. First of all, like, why'd you help like Bill Casey? Do they like support them in Afghanistan? But also they let the Saudis build a bunch of mosques, I think even in Xinjiang, for like the last 30 years. So they've just been letting the Saudis build these style of mosques all around their country, and now they're like, oh wow, this is a problem. But like they're not actually. I don't know. Like it still seems they're on pretty good relations with the Saudis overall, and certainly aren't calling them out. You notice that China like never really calls out Saudi Arabia. They talk about how
they don't.
They might allude to the West kind of causing trouble, but never Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, they are like, they have pushback against the ideas of mosques being like Arabized, and that's like one of their big talking points, but it obviously doesn't stop there. Like, and when I remember reading one thing about how they just like demolished like a classical Chinese style mosque, and then a new Arab mosque was like rebuilt, and they were like, well, this mosque is Arabized.
Weird, but they let them do it.
Yeah, they let them do it, but also it's disingenuous. Like, their concern about it being Arab, like, isn't the problem. Like, it really is Uyghur Islam in general that is being cracked down upon, or even Hui Islam.
You're saying it's like they're more hostile to the more like indigenous traditions of kind of like Uyghur or Hui Islam than they are to the kind of foreign, more sus like Wahhabi financed like version that you'd think would be the one they'd be most worried about if they're worried about terrorism. But you're saying they're kind of not. Like they're more worried about kind of snuffing, like, stomping out or kind of erasing the more like, deeply rooted like ethno-cultural
I think that their argument isn't like, really one that people can empathize with in general, because it's not really about terrorism. It's about like Arab. They might use that excuse maybe in some discourses, but really they are just like, well, this is foreign, so this isn't good. But that is, I think, disingenuous, because that doesn't stop there ever.
I see. You're saying that like they say like the only reason we're cracking down on this mosque is because it's Arabized. Otherwise, we don't have a problem with it. But they're shutting down Hui mosques as well.
But there were tons of. But the reason why all these mosques are being built is because, like, the earlier mosques that were in Chinese-style architecture were destroyed. So
what the hell? What the hell is going on? It's like why did you destroy the original ones and then let the Saudis come in and build? I don't know. It's just like what's really going on with that? It doesn't seem great, but. So I don't know. Bottom line, ISIS, very sus. Michael Aquino was a fan, apparently. He thought they should have their own polity. and
yes,
you know, they're more stuff that they'll come up a lot as a reference point, and you know, I don't know. Like I said, finding that sergeant guy, that whistleblower Greg Ford, one day, maybe we can get him to come on SJ and tell us about meeting Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Samarra in 2003 before he got taken off and tortured and MK'd at Abu Ghraib. But yeah.
Yeah,
pretty sus, and YPG sus as well. We, you know, there's no way around it. You know.
Yes, definitely is incredibly sus. Yeah.
I want you to think about something. I want you to think about all the things that people have said to you that have bothered you. I had people telling me, you'll never be this, you'll never be that, you'll never do this, you're crazy. We all get beat up. We all have frustration. We all have things that hurt us internally. We all have things that beat us down and make us want to quit. People get pushed to the brink. They get pushed to the edge. And it's what you do when you get to that edge that determines what you're going to be. Go be a bitch or do the fucking work. So many of you guys give up. You need to take everything that everybody said and shove it down their fucking throats. You know why? Because it feels fucking good. Positivity is extremely overrated when it comes to motivation. I'm a big believer and thankful for all the negativity I've dealt with in my life. All the people who made it hard. All the people who fucking made shit much harder than it had to be. I love those people. I should write them a fucking thank you card. Because if it wasn't for those motherfuckers, I wouldn't be who the fuck I am. When you get to that point of frustration, of anger, of being pissed off, that is tremendous fucking fuel for you to go out and do the shit that you want to do. Where you've had enough. You look at yourself in the mirror and you're fucking disgusted. You're sick and tired of your life. It's what you do at that point that fucking matters.
You want to read the follow-up from Future Shock here?
Future Shock's follow-up is, also as a secondary question, what's your opinion on mass shootings as mass ritual? There's clearly some strategy of tension stuff going on, but I'd love to hear your take too. Will we be getting a mass shooter episode at any point, or perhaps a deep dive on Stephen Paddock / Parkland / Columbine, etc.? A Paddock deep dive would be great. Oh, this is not Fox Mulder added. A Paddock deep dive would be great because TA seemed to dance around many things, even in their SJ length episode. I guess TA refers to TrueAnon, and I resent the implication that they had a SJ length episode. What, they did like an hour and a half long? Let me look up how long it was. Stephen Paddock episode.
I didn't listen to it, so I don't know.
It's kind of, yeah, I didn't listen to it either, but I did notice people talking about it. Yeah, so the idea that...
I think it wasn't as long... It wasn't as long as our shortest episode, and I'm including the ones we split into two.
Yeah, so...
It's okay, though. It's okay.
Anyway, it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
No, not Fox is coming from a good place here. You know,
he is coming from a good place. Yes, he just wants a Paddock deep dive. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in our Ed Offerman episode, which probably will be out by the time this is out. That has a little bit of discourse on it, but there's more. You know, there's definitely more there.
What do you think about
claim?
Yes. What do you think about, we just kind of were talking about it, but the mass shootings as mass ritual?
I think there's definitely something to that. I mean, I think of Christchurch often, where I think that it's so like revoltingly mediatized. Like the way he filmed it just seems like, you know, a mass shooting, not a mass shooting, like a first-person shooter video game. You know,
yes,
the way that people participate in these things and the imagination of the shooters. I think there definitely is. Well, depending upon the shooter, I think that there's definitely. I mean, it has become something that's ritualized. You know, it's a ritualized routine normative part of culture in the same way that, like, you know, in Basad, Iraq, people say that it's ritualized for elites to go to monasteries and like drink alcohol made by monks there or something, you know, whether or not whatever your discourse on that are, it's ritualized for disenfranchised young males to shoot people, like disenfranchised, unstable, you know, disconsolate or whatever, antisocial young males to go commit a mass shooting in public. Publish some kind of manifesto, you know, as a way to make their mark on the society, to express their feelings of alienation or whatever. So it definitely is a component of our society. And there's also obviously the ritualized outpouring of grief, the ritualized refrains of, you know, we need this solution, you know, but like, no, that's not enough.
Yeah, the hashtag strong,
so,
you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the Facebook filters, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or Je suis Charlie.
Yeah, but also... Oh, God, that was the worst. But also, you know, and really even the ritualized conspiracy theorizing as well. Yeah. And all these aspects of it recur, you know. There's always the confusion, you know, how many shooters are there?
How many shooters?
And every time...
there were 3 shooters.
How many shooters? Yeah, exactly. Every time there's all these details that don't quite ever come together.
Yeah, like the San Bernardino, repeatedly there were 3 shooters there, got reduced to 2. The Dallas one where they creepily all night. I think you might have been visiting me at the time when we watched that when it was happening. That like 2016 shooting where for hours they talked about how they had been caught in like a triangulated kill zone, the cops, and there were 3 shooters that were doing, and they kept mentioning after that this was happening just like steps away from Dealey Plaza where JFK was shot. And they just kept repeating it over and over and over again. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, stop. Why do you keep talking about how there's like 3 shooters that did it? And you're also keep mentioning the poignance of that this is right where JFK got shot. And then it finds out, it's just one crazy guy doing it the whole time. And there was just a lone gunman and we blew him up with a drone robot. End of story. You know? And that guy was a U.S. military veteran. So like there's definitely a Gladio strategy of tension aspect to a lot of that stuff. I mean, there was just I remember there was a spat of that in like 2015 and 2016, and then just sort of like stopped after Trump got elected. But then there was like, then it switched to like the Chan shooter, but it all did kind of follow a similar rubric and like framework, like the manifesto.
Yeah, well, I think that there were, even before Trump, it wasn't as Trump obviously like changed the political discourse radically, and it is true, you know, as much of a lib take as this is, it's absolutely true that Trump did do a lot to make people of a white supremacist or like a right-wing reactionary persuasion feel empowered and feel like, you know, it was somehow their moment and that they had to take action. Like that it was a political change where those people came to the fore more. But there were still people largely in the same vein. You know, maybe the rhetoric changed slightly, but like the Aurora shooter wasn't that different from
and also really big MK vibes with him. I mean, there was that whole weird, again, with the revisionist kind of history of initially they're like, he said I am the Joker when they arrested him, and then it turns out like he never said that.
Right.
You know, it's just very bizarre.
Yeah, that was like a thing where that also happened when the Joker movie came out, where people are like, there's going to be a mass shooting at the Joker. You know, like I don't know what is going on with, talk about a mass ritual, the evil clown, blah, blah. I don't know what is going on with the Joker, but they want it. They want a clown to psychotically murder people. I don't know
they
why.
do.
But
the
anyway,
evil clown. Yeah, exactly. So I think in an SK Bain sense, like there often have been like weird little synchronicities or
I'm sure not even in SK Bain's sense. I'm sure in SK Bain's actual opinion, like most mass shootings are like mass rituals. But I'm even thinking about, you know, going back to Christchurch again, like in terms of the last question that we received, like all the themes
of that, like the themes of it having to do with Islam, with the West, you know, the way that it was framed in his manifesto. It's really like the same genre as like an ISIS attack. And the same sort of spectacle aspect of it is...
the propaganda of the deed, basically. Railing against the civilizational order or a threat to that civilizational order, either way.
Yes.
And
You know,
really kind
those
of
two
nihilistic
things,
either way.
Yeah, they work perfectly together. Like, ISIS is something that type of individual thrives on, and vice versa.
It's pretty creepy. And I think at some point, definitely a Stephen Paddock, the Parkland shooting, we talked about Elsa Gate and all that weird shit, and also Columbine, the OG that kicked it all off, really.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to go back to Columbine and study more about the weird,
I've seen some people doing some sus stuff about, like, saying some new sus aspects of Columbine recently, so that might be interesting.
I remember, they had Nazi flags in their room, but then the parents claimed they just never went in their room, so they never noticed the huge swastika flag. I remember that when I was like a kid, and that was in the news. I was like, what? Yeah, there's just a lot of weird, and that's that whole area of Colorado is just sus. Then you had the Aurora shooting, and then what was the most recent thing we had in Colorado that was so awful?
There was another one.
Wasn't it a supermarket shooting? Yeah, there was the crazy guy who went in and shot people, like the guy from Cobra, and then just walked outside and took his clothes off or something. Very bizarre. Yeah, so I don't know. It's very
And then there was
weird,
the Asian murder that happens.
The spa, the Asian massage parlor.
Yeah.
God, they're kicking up again, and they all seem to they definitely get plugged in and kind of used for ideological purposes once they happen.
Well,
now.
Every time it happens, people just jump on it. Every time, everyone is just wanting it to be, this. Or
if I have to hear one more, if I have to hear one more lib do a variation on fuck your thoughts and prayers, I'm gonna go insane.
Yeah,
because it's just okay, we get it. Okay, we fucking get it.
Not only
that's more annoying than people saying thoughts and prayers at this point. Is people making fun of people for saying thoughts and prayers? At what point are you they're just kind of gaslighting you or pressuring you into passing some kind of gun control thing they'll crave. But if you're not gonna do that, then you saying that you sympathize with the victims, you're a monster. I don't know. It's just annoying. It's shut up. Stop being so. Stop trying to take the guns.
Because that also doesn't do anything. You saying
you're right.
Stop
you're
saying
right.
thoughts and prayers does nothing either.
Yeah.
It certainly
exactly.
I mean, praying always has an effect if it's you have the niyyah in your heart, but saying some bullshit on Twitter doesn't always have an effect. So
no, it doesn't.
Yeah,
So
one is less efficacious than the other.
Yeah, but that's they keep kind of brute forcing it. It's they did a trial run of let's send 5 program to kill young men out there just to massacre a bunch of people and see if we can move the needle. And it didn't seem like it really worked, but. Try again. I mean, is that what they're doing? I think whatever this is much bigger than simply wanting to pass a gun control bill or simply wanting to stir up maybe political tensions or something like that. It feels it does go back to Gladio and even before false flags ain't nothing new. And agents or people that are manipulated. People that are manipulated into, assassinating a politician or doing a massacre that gets blamed on certain people. That has been going on for a very long time. So I think it is naive to think that I'm still Stephen Paddock. I still, there's so much susness that I do have to do more research because I haven't really refreshed myself in a while. But it does feel there's maybe some sus money laundering, arms dealer, also getting MK'd by Joker poker kind of stuff going on.
Yes,
and
you definitely
I don't know.
Was MK'd by the Joker poker gin.
I think we should also maybe I don't know because I have I right Joker poker. There you go again. It's Joker and then Elsagate. Who's the star of Elsagate all the time doing bad things?
Oh yes, Spider-Man probably is the biggest one, but also the Joker.
I mean Spidey's kind of Spidey can be naughty at times. Yeah, Spider-Man and Elsa,
Yeah.
but who's the main antagonist that does a lot of creepy shit? Like
Probably the Joker,
is like Elsa's dentist who pulls out like a big needle and that kind of thing. It's like
right,
usually
exactly.
the Joker
Or cuts
who
off
does
Elsa's,
that.
turns Elsa's fingers into snakes or something. Yeah.
Or oh my god, it's so creepy. But that is so I don't know. We'll dig into it one day. I don't know what they're saying that TrueAnon danced around because I didn't listen to it. I wonder if they discussed, probably not in that short running time, but if they discussed that kind of wild theory that it was all about like actually an attempt to like assassinate Mohammed bin Salman at like the Four Seasons Hotel, and there was like crossfire from like other like helicopters and shit. I remember that. I forget who was kind of like rolling that out there. I feel like it was probably discredited, but it was definitely a wild hot take on what was going on. It's kind of the ultimate ISIS attack. Like it was, some kind of like Saudi internal shootout that was like, sounds like a set piece from a Brian De Palma movie, honestly. It's like there's a sniper at a tower at a country music festival in Las Vegas, and then like deep state, like Saudi intelligence assets or like Blackwater mercenaries are like sniping at Mohammed bin Salman's like penthouse suite with like a 50 cal rifle while people shoot at them from helicopters. Like it's so, I don't know, like, but that was a thing that was kind of floated out there. And the other thing was that I remember there was like a weird thing. That journalist Greg Palast?
No, I don't.
I forget what he was. He's a super 2000s guy. Maybe it was like Alternet or like one of those old websites that he kind of wrote for all the time. He did a lot of stuff about how like the 2004 election might have been like stolen by Bush. But he's also in this kind of weird Democracy Now! Kind of like pro Julian Assange, like weird little orbit. And he did like a video after the Vegas shooting with Shailene Woodley, the actress. And he was talking about how he like went to high school with Stephen Paddock. And but it was like this very like kind of like weirdly like consciously produced sort of video of them like walking through this town in the San Fernando Valley where I guess Paddock and him both grew up, and maybe Shailene Woodley grew up there too, which is why she was talking to him. And he was just saying like, yeah, like, he was making some argument about how like the Boeing factory or something in their town like shut down, and everybody that didn't get out from his high school class like ended up being kind of fucked up and like had no economic future, and almost making this argument of like, yeah, this is what happens when we like deindustrialize and like don't take care of people and like don't have economic justice. Like Stephen Paddock goes on a rant. It was just weird. It was just like a weird fucking take to have on the whole thing, as if like that was the most explanatory aspect of what happened.
He had a lot of money. He like wasn't poor. As far as we know.
He did work for Boeing, I believe. He worked for Boeing as a younger person, so, and then he worked like all around the world and had his money from Joker Poker and had all these guns. Like, what? It just seems like we're doing
an arsenal like for years. Yeah,
I smell some like Pacifica Limited Hangout vibes of like, let's reframe this to make it just like a sentimental story about how like we should have more like I don't know. It's just kind of weird, but we'll dive into it one day.
I mean, it is weird how that's like just been, because it's so inscrutable and like it doesn't really have like any kind of like clear motive. It's not like Dylan Roof, who we hear about all the time, because he was a white supremacist, or even Elliot Rodger, who another pre-Trump kind of incel type guy, who you still hear about sometimes. The Supreme Gentleman, as he called himself. You still hear about that. You still hear about like even the Aurora shooter. I feel like you still hear about, because there's like a little whiff of like politicization with the Joker.
It's the Batman connection that freaks people out.
The highest level of politics is when it has to do with Marvel or whatever.
DC.
Yeah, exactly. But like with Stephen Paddock, it's like just so inscrutable that's kind of really fallen into the background. Even though it was a huge mass shooting, it was one of the most deadly ever.
Yeah, it was massive, and you're right. They memory hold it pretty damn quick after it became clear that they remember when they had like the guy who apparently shot him like disappeared, like the security guard, and they were like they couldn't like produce him for several days, and they're like and like they kept changing the story. It was just so bizarre, and it's like they didn't have a good narrative to roll out to kind
all
of put
I remember
a bow around it.
Was like all the fucking people on right-wing Twitter being like, he wasn't ISIS, source ISIS, you know, like, yeah, thanks.
Well, that's also true as well. For how big it was, the difficulty that people had politicizing it makes it a little bit unique in the kind of annal of mass shootings. Like, you couldn't categorize it as this is an ISIS guy or this is a Trump white supremacist guy. And you know, the most you could say is, like, I guess gun control, because people be crazy, you know, and so that was the extent to which.
He was anti-country music, I guess, maybe, so. That's like
truly paradoxical. And I think it did get Trump to support banning bump stocks, but I don't know if that already got overturned or not. But I remember that was like the one time that Trump kind of acceded, you know, basically conceded some kind of like gun reform thing. I don't know if they ever actually did it, but just, really, really weird and couldn't be kind of instrumentalized, it seems, by any of the various kind of powerful factions. And so that puts an even bigger question mark on it, because if you kind of think about the logic of like a Gladio attack or some kind of false flag, you do it with like an intended result in mind of like, you want to get a reaction and use it to maybe do something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. But like, what was that with the Paddock shooting? Just shoot a bunch of country music. Like it was like it was like a white on white attack. It was like an old white dude with money shooting a bunch of like mostly white country music fans.
The ultimate example of white on white crime. Yeah.
So, like, what's the message there? Like, you're attacking the whitest genre of music? I don't know, you know?
I guess allegedly he did have some concerns about, you know, after Hurricane Katrina, he allegedly said, you know, that it was the FEMA camps and stuff were a dry run for the law enforcement and military, so kicking down doors, you know, and confiscating guns, Agenda 21.
Okay, so he might have been a bit of a sovereign citizen.
Probably. I mean, he did have an arsenal, which people like that tend to be, but I don't know if that's the whole story there.
I don't know either.
Yeah, it was like that episode of The Twilight Zone where the guy, like, you know, is a morally upright guy who hates gambling, but, like, he, you know, gets seduced by, like, an evil... Not that Stephen Paddock ever hated gambling, but just, like, the aspect of, like, the satanic slot machine that, like, taunts him and, like, follows him to his room with, like, the coin jingling sound. Like, that's...
Oh, my God.
That happened, and that drove him insane, I think.
It was Joker Poker doing it.
In my opinion, yeah. I think the clown from Joker Poker sat on his shoulder under a toadstool and drove him mad.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's truly, the Dracularity is immense at that one. So we'll come back. We'll come back. We'll do it justice. We'll do a good subliminal jihad link.
Yeah. We just got to
exploration.
We just got to put a little bit of air between us and the you know, the I'm sure inadequate exploration of it that occurred on other podcasts.
We don't do tailism. We only get tailed.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of the time. Let's move on then to number 12 from It's Drew Time. And he asks, you may have gone into it already, but what are your thoughts on Don DeLillo? Early COVID days reminded me of White Noise. Yeah, have you read White Noise?
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, I remember White Noise. And I also remember a Don DeLillo book that I thought was interesting. Was it White Noise that I'm thinking of? Again, like, you know, these days I don't read too many novels, but the one I'm thinking of was a little bit different. I think it was a more
Underworld.
Maybe it was Falling Man. Am I thinking of Falling Man? That was the one about 9/11, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's interesting. I think I kind of like Don DeLillo as far as, you know, American novelists of that, like literary novelists of that kind of generation. I would put him up towards the top. However, I've only read White Noise. I probably read it like almost like 8 or 9 years ago, and I started reading Libra, which is about Lee Harvey Oswald and is kind of like a JFK conspiracy book, but I didn't get too super far into it. I believe that the ultimate thing is kind of that, like, yeah, there was a conspiracy, but kind of I don't know. It's like JFK was like he wasn't meant to actually be killed, and then he was. I don't know. I can't really speak. He also wrote something called Mao 2, which
Mao 2. I haven't heard of that one or read it.
Yeah, but I mean, he did Underworld. I haven't seen the movie Cosmopolis or read it. It's kind of been on my list to like maybe read a little more because I think he's kind of. I did like White Noise a lot. I kind of forget. I know there's like the airborne toxic event or whatever that happens that a lot of people were comparing to COVID and the vibes of COVID, of like this ambiguous biological threat that is kind of lurking on the periphery of the novel in the town where it takes place. And it's like, yeah, I think it gets into the kind of a like Baudrillard simulacrum kind of thing in a way, and
yeah,
and it's got it's got some weird kind of paranoid vibes and stuff like that. Yeah, no, I think, but I also kind of feel a little bit like he's kind of like the more I'm getting a little bit more into Pynchon, that he's kind of like Pynchon light.
Yeah, I think that he's
kind of the vibe
a bit more accessible than Pynchon for sure. Yeah,
he is, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because at least I think he there's some overlap there where
yeah, there's and I think that he's much more of a Baudrillardian than Pynchon. I think maybe Pynchon is more of a I don't know, Mark Lombardi type materialist take, where Baudrillard is more about, simulacra and image and that type of thing, where I think that is more of a theme in Delillo's work, something that, Baudrillard wrote about, I'm probably saying his name wrong because it's French, but Baudrillard, but yeah, anyway, so he wrote about 9/11 as like a work of art, of avant-garde art. I think that's a big theme in Falling Man, and I think it's a theme in other things. I was just looking up Mao too, and I think it's a similar idea that, in the book, that novelists are becoming obsolete in an age where terrorism has supplanted art as the raids on consciousness that jolt and transform culture at large. One of the heroes of the book, I guess. Yeah, it feels that.
Like ISIS.
Being a concern, yes.
Like ISIS and like Trump. Trump's kind of an aesthetic terrorist, to quote that other scholar that we talked. I think he is kind of doing aesthetic terrorism. He's working evil in an evil medium, just like Kenneth Anger.
Yes.
I did notice there's
one really weird Don DeLillo book, Point Omega. Did you read that or hear about that?
No. What is that?
Yeah,
about?
that was kind of another like meditation on art. It was very odd, and I think there were some deliberate parallels to Gravity's Rainbow, or maybe just people compared it to Gravity's Rainbow. Yeah, one of the big sort of key pieces of it was the 24-hour Psycho, like basically Psycho slowed down so that it would last for 24 hours, like an actual conceptual art piece that was created in 1993. Yeah, it's like
I see that.
Very odd book. Yeah,
it's said to share with Gravity's Rainbow the kind of idea that capitalism and Western civilization is actually a death cult.
Yes, definitely. It's a very spooky but a very oblique book.
Also, also a very weird kind of one of his earlier. He dabbled in sci-fi. I did not know this, but he wrote kind of an interesting little. I don't know. It sounds like it might be a novel in 1976, a comic novel called Ratner's Star. And it's the story of a child prodigy mathematician who arrives at a secret installation to work on the problem of deciphering a mysterious message that appears to come from outer space. The novel has been described as famously impenetrable. And it was structured after Alice's...
I'm kind of interested to read that.
Makes me think of Brett Ratner, that boy prodigy who got into NYU Film School at 16 and was mentored by Meyer Lansky, and then also like every other gifted child prodigy that we've talked about recently. And like what was that novel about buying a boy that we talked about with Jimmy?
Yes, we were talking about The Child Buyer.
Yes,
right.
The Child Buyer.
So this actually is interesting. This is a review of Ratner's Star that I found just Googling Ratner's Star on Kierkegaard. It mentions Kurt Vonnegut, or sort of, alludes to Kurt Vonnegut, which relates to, I think, a question that we got in an earlier Q&A. It says, Billy Pilgrim, meet Billy Twillig. No Vonnegutian unstuck-in time traveler, but another lugubrious, pubescent hero beset by strange experiences having to do with extraterrestrial contact and space-time distortion. DeLillo's Billy is a 14-year-old Bronx-bred mathematical genius, recipient of the Nobel Prize, who is summoned to a huge computer radio telescope complex called Space Brain to decode a cryptic message received from the vicinity of Ratner's star. The author of Americana and Endzone has invented a futuristic surrealist research institute where the beauty and terror of pure science meets the absurdity of bureaucratic science and the paranoia of corporate applied science. Billy must dodge the attempts of a secret Honduran/Germanic cartel led by Elix Troxel, who speaks Latin garble, and Gurbik, who smells like a foot and speaks speed writing, to wire his brain to Space Brain for purposes of profit. He must also elude the seductions of pneumatic female colleagues and the nameless perils of a knowledge which has driven one eminent colleague to live in a hole and eat worms, another into fits of narcolepsy. Don DeLillo's novel pirouettes madly at the new/ancient intersection of science and mysticism, simultaneously participating in and parodying our most modern discoveries, that we are as primitive as ever in the face of the expanded unknown, and that all knowledge curves back a boomerang like on the South. It is a novel to be read not for plot, rambling, obscure, nor for character, 1,000 loony variations on the author, but for prose. DeLillo's enraptured aria to the twin Kabbalah of mathematics and language, in arc after dazzling arc of words. Cool.
Wow. Okay, we might have to read that. That is a lot
yeah, I'd be
of
curious to read that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh wow. You know what? I think he went to. Did he? Oh no. Well, I guess he went to Fordham, but then he did publish his first short story in Cornell University's literary magazine Epoch. Mm-hmm. So I thought for a second that he'd gone to Cornell, you know, same as Pynchon, but he grew up a working class Italian family in the Bronx. Yeah, and nothing particularly you know, I guess the Ratner Star was favorably compared to the works of Thomas Pynchon. Somebody called it conceptual monster. Yeah, the picaresque story of a 14-year-old math genius who joins an international consortium of mad scientists decoding an alien message, and his name was Jeffrey Epstein. I mean,
and Cosmopolis, which became a De Palma movie,
no,
right?
Cronenberg.
No, that was Cronenberg. It was
Cronenberg.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll still get to talk about that if we ever do Cronenberg, but. Yeah,
very interesting. And George Will did call
these little-known DeLillo books, Mao 2 and Ratner Star, ones that I'm very intrigued by, because I'm a bit familiar with the more well-known ones, like White Noise and Underworld, but these ones are a bit obscure. It is interesting that he was on the cusp of the whole, this is in 1991 that he wrote Mao 2. So it was, before 9/11 and everything, and it was Maoist terrorists who were the sort of key terrorists in the novel. Although he later...
And also an ex-member of the Unification Church, the Moonies, are wrapped up in it. And yeah, this novel was praised by Thomas Pynchon. So we could do a little DeLillo. I think he could, and I think his literary take on I do have Libra here, so I could read that and see. Kind of curious to see what his take, though I suspect I won't ultimately agree with it, but it still might be good, and I would support things like that, like kind of like literary explorations of these like huge conspiracies. And I mean, I think, he probably does have that.
He seems to be very into a lot of the topics that I can see why we asked this question. Because, there's also 0K, which is about a billionaire who wants to cryogenically preserve himself.
Okay, so that's another kind of Epstein synchronicity right there. Or I don't know if he was like I mean, it said that the Ratner Star was maybe autobiographical. I wonder if he was brought into a gifted children program.
Yeah,
in the
did
Bronx,
he get a call on a God phone, maybe?
Yeah, wasn't Jack Sarfati from the Bronx? I believe he was.
I believe so, yeah.
And he was, let me see, 36. They might have actually been, holy shit, they might have been like, he was born in 36, so he might have been 2 or 3 years older than Sarfati, right? Wasn't Sarfati born in like 39?
I'm looking up if there are any connections between them right now, just to see. He was born in 39, but I'm just looking up if they've been the same breath together. It doesn't seem like anything really comes up, though.
but I don't
I
know.
straight up got it looks like there aren't any great matches for your search when I searched those two names together. All right, Google, chill out. Yeah, I don't know. There's it doesn't really look like any real hits. I guess they're both. Oh, you know what? Well, wait, they're both Italian.
Yes, they're both Italian.
They're both Italian in the
There you
Bronx, born 3 years apart
Prove
from
it.
each other. And he wrote a novel about. He wrote an autobiographical novel about being like a math whiz who gets taken to like an evil secret government factory or facility to talk to aliens. He doesn't quite say he got a call on the God phone or anything, but
Well, maybe he does. We haven't read the book. There might be.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean,
we just read the summary.
I just typed in Don DeLillo God phone because I gotta know. And nothing I can see right now, but maybe he just puts it in his fiction. It's quite possible.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
he
yeah.
might be the low key Whitley Strieber. Not wanting to come out and say it's all true.
Exactly. Even Pynchon, for that matter. What if he got the God phone call, but like said no, and then he wondered for the rest of his life, like what the hell that was.
Maybe.
I mean, did somebody say? Yeah, did anybody say no to the God phone, and then what happened to them? I'd be curious. I assume if they cared enough to call you on the God phone, they would probably follow up or try to get you. They wouldn't just give up if you were like, "Who's this weirdo?" No, I don't believe. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that Jack Sarfati even said that he didn't quite remember what he was even asked. He just knew that he said yes. And I wonder if Daniel Sheehan said something similar, but yeah.
Yeah, well, anyways, I think it warrants further investigation. Jumping...
Right, were there any...
Jumping ahead here to number 13.
Yeah.
You want to read that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, sure. Sphinx Walkthrough asks, SJ, any thoughts on the Chupacabra? We'll definitely do a Chupacabra episode. We're doing basically every cryptid. We're, doing a March to the Cryptid Institutions. I mean, Chupacabra was a big cryptid when I was young in the 90s. That was one of the, banner cryptids that you would hear about. That's one of the marquee cryptids. I don't know, the Chupacabra, what's unique about it to me is that it's connected to the animal mutilations. What would happen, the predation of the Chupacabra and the animal mutilations by UFOs are kind of the same. I guess it's a similar thing to the Mothman in that there's a vampirism aspect and there's also a UFO aspect.
Kind of interdimensional, kind of in a Mothman kind of way.
Yeah. Definitely a Mothman type thing, but there's also the unique aspect, of course, is that it's I think it first emerged in Puerto Rico, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, in 1995.
Oh yeah, so I guess that makes sense why it was such a big cryptid in the 90s, because it was a relatively new one.
I guess it's rooted in older traditions, or in the Americas.
Yeah, I mean, of course,
but
I guess the idea of vampirism. Similar to what we kind of talked about in our Dogman episode with the Beast of Bray Road, where it was first, there was a little bit of satanic appropriate reaction occurring around the deaths of these farm animals, right? And that reminds me of what John Keel said about the animal mutilations, that people would see these hairy creatures taking these things off, and then it would create this whole pall over everything where they would be associated with these hairy beasts, but he suspected that maybe something, much more sinister was going on, or, much more occultic, maybe. Or satanic,
you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
people initially thought that it was, right? Like, people thought that there... Or I guess in Mocha, Puerto Rico in 1975, there were killings of farm animals. Then they were attributed to El Vampiro de Mocha, the vampire of Mocha. Initially, it was suspected the killings were committed by a satanic cult. Later, more killings were reported on the island, and many farms reported loss of animal life. Each of the animals was reported to have had its body bled dry through a series of small circular incisions. So that's interesting because, there's a big military installation and, testing range in Puerto Rico. So you got a big military presence. It's U.S. territory. 1975, the dawn of the Aeon of Set was just proclaimed. And, it's kind of, it's interesting that people initially went towards the satanic cult explanation, and then later they thought, oh, it's like a chupacabra, it's aliens, it's something else. Whereas actually the satanic cult actually sounds like a more grounded explanation than, you know, not to discount the chupacabra entirely, but you know what I mean. Like it's it could be some people that extract the blood out of a cow. That's not an impossible thing to do, and do it in a creepy way.
No, it's not.
Mysterious.
Yeah, and that, I you know, you should refer to our Mothman episode for that passage having to do with blood, because Mothman did have a sort of vampiric aspect to him as well that's less appreciated, and, you know, a UFO connection similar to the chupacabra. And John Keel had an interesting passage that was about, like, the connection between the idea of satanic blood sacrifice rituals and animal mutilations and some of these cryptids, because animal mutilation is an interesting kind of triangular thing where it has that association of the occult, UFOs, and cryptids, and particularly the chupacabra is the number one animal mutilation cryptid. You know, that is the premier animal mutilation cryptid,
and a really scary one.
Actually,
I mean, it's like kind of a reptoid. It's it's
kind of a
reptoid.
I remember like visiting Puerto Rico like at some point in the 90s and seeing like, you know, it was a thing, like a tourist thing where I saw like, you know, cardboard cutouts of chupacabra and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, apparently they tracked down the original eyewitness to the chupacabra. Her name was Madeline Tolentino Canovanas, a town in the east of Puerto Rico. In 1995, she reported the alien creature, seeing it outside her window. There's a guy, I guess an author, named Radford, Benjamin Radford, and he wanted to track down the chupacabra. He decided to write a book about this, and, you know, he tracked down the original witness, and he approached the chupacabra with an open mind, employing what he calls investigative skepticism. And he says, of course, I was initially skeptical of the creature's existence, but at the same time I was mindful that new animals have yet to be discovered. But he talks about how certain, you know, hairless animals with mange get identified as a chupacabra because they've lost their hair. He had a couple of interesting takes on it. He said that that maybe it had to do with anti-US sentiment. So he said, when an animal dies, the heart and blood pressure stop. The blood seeps to the lowest part of the body and it coagulates and thickens. It's called lividity, and it gives the illusion they've been drained of blood. So if all the mythology surrounding the chupacabra actually comes down to some fairly commonplace natural phenomena, why do stories live on with such vehemence today? Basically, his argument was that, like, these animals were dying of some kind of natural causes, that they would just be the victims of ordinary predators, and then they would seem to have
appear that they were
puncture marks just naturally. Yeah.
Okay.
But he felt that it might have something to do with the anti-U.S. sentiment found across Latin America. It is particularly true in Puerto Rico, which is an unusual position because of the non-state territory of the U.S. I spoke to several Puerto Ricans who felt that the U.S. had exploited, shortchanged, and ignored the island in economic and in many other ways. He says, well, that's true. So that has made them irrational and believe in false chupacabras. No, he didn't say that, but, you know. As for chupacabras, there are many Puerto Ricans who believe they are another indication of American exploitation and meddling, the result of top-secret U.S. scientific experiments taking place in the El Yunque rainforest not far from Tolentino's hometown.
I'm going with that. Yeah, the chupacabra is a chimera created by the U.S. military.
Yes, this is what his take was, which I kind of don't like. He said that, you know, what might explain the initial sightings, having explained away the mysterious specimens and how they might operate, what does Radford think inspired Tolentino to come up with such a story in the first place? Radford noticed that Tolentino's 1995 description was similar to the alien from the 1995 movie Species, which had recently been released in Puerto Rico and which she had watched. The film was set in the present day, revolves around top-secret U.S. scientific experiments, and was partly filmed in Puerto Rico. It's all there. She sees the movie, then later she sees something she mistakes for a monster, says Radford. While he is careful to clarify he does not think any witnesses are lying, he does suggest the sighting could simply be the result of an overactive imagination. Yeah, I don't know about that. I feel like if you're an adult, this is kind of like, you know, like a little bit like racist to think that like I cannot imagine like I mean my mom once did call the cops on the meter man thinking that he was trying to break into her house, but you know she didn't think he was a chupacabra. You know, I feel like it's if you're an adult you're not gonna hallucinate chupacabra because you saw a movie. You know, you're not gonna
I feel kind of the same way as like saying that the UCLA archaeologist got so excited about like the possibility of finding a tunnel that he just like foolishly like declared that there was a tunnel when there wasn't. You know, I think I mean maybe we should
that's different in a way because a tunnel well, this is a little bit different because a tunnel is like, plausible or like, normal, whereas like I guess, but why would you think like the being from Species would be real?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, that's a real leap of. It's just kind of a thing of like, I bet they were just silly.
You weren't
and that's
expecting to see like it's not like you're like, I saw the movie Species, so now it's normal for me to expect that I might see, whereas it's slightly
true. It's a little
more
slightly
of a
different.
leap. You have to be quite there has to be some other kind of motive to just
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
It's kind of like the Betty and Barney Hill thing, where it's like, there's an episode. You can always find some. This is another sci-fi psyop aspect. You can always find some sci-fi property that's going to have something roughly matching any gin that anybody sees. So at any time, if you just want to write something off, if it's sufficient to dismiss it, to say that like, there was another being that was seen. There's other like depicted like this in a movie, then there's always going to be something like that. No matter what, you're always going to be able to find like wraparound eyes, whatever someone says, whatever they see. There's always going to be something like that in a movie.
Glowing red eyes.
Even if it's like a nameless force beyond space and time or something, that like it's like it sounds similar to descriptions that were in H.P. Lovecraft. So he said it had.
What if that's true because
they're
all real?
And
Yeah,
I definitely heard that.
What if that's true because they're all real, not
to...
because they're all fake?
Exactly. That this is all limited hangout. Yeah, they're all real. And they're all
the muse. Where do our ideas come from? I don't know. That's too deep. But So I'm not going to dismiss
Ma'ani Matruha. Meanings are scattered on the road. No one makes up ideas. They're out there to be found. It's all about the form that the ideas come into, and sometimes they appear in the form of a man. Sometimes they appear in the form of a chupacabra. All right.
Well, okay.
So
we can.
Yeah. The next question is a little bit weird because the person requested that it not actually be read in the form that it is written.
Do you want to read first? Do you want to read first what they requested us to only say?
Yes, but I don't think that we should read what they wrote. To honor their request, right? They requested us to only say, right? We shouldn't disrespect their request.
So many good questions. There's so many good questions in here, though. How could we possibly? No, fine. We'll play the game. You're right. We'll play the game.
Let's be like they asked pretty nicely. They said, "Don't do this." So like we should, right? I guess they didn't say please, but they did ask. So I feel like we should. Honor it. Anyway,
we'll honor it. Yeah. So just I guess say
aquatic ape ?
All right. I'd never heard of the aquatic ape or the aquatic ape theory before, and I did look it up, and I guess there's a whole theory about this that I guess involves the water side hypothesis of human evolution, which is that some ancestors of modern humans became adapted to an aquatic habitat, and that's why we're bipedal and we lost our hair, I guess is the gist of it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or do you know anything about the aquatic ape theory?
I've definitely heard of this come up like around like mermaid stuff. I think that originally, like when it was floated, it was meant to be a bit more serious than that. It's reminding me of this like TikTok I saw recently where this like bizarre dude is like in the middle of a forest, and it starts with him just taking like a sudden step towards the camera and just like staring directly into it and saying like, there is no such thing as a coincidence. If you're watching this video, this means that you have an energetic connection with me and aquafarians, but you may know them as mermaids.
Wow.
I think I posted it in the grotto maybe, but yeah, like I've definitely heard the aquatic ape thing come up because then if human beings evolved to be like an aquatic ape, or that we came out of the ocean or something, then maybe there are still aquatic apes out there, you know. But I don't even think that was necessarily the key idea of the aquatic ape. Well, maybe it is, because, you know, in 1942, German pathologist Max Westenhofer, 1942.
1942, huh? Okay.
Yeah, German pathologist Max Westenhofer. Wow, Max Westenhofer, he contributed to the development of anatomic pathology and the reform of public health in Chile.
Oh, it's cool.
Yes.
Wonder how he ended up there. Weird.
Apparently he was there even before.
He was the deputy chair. Yeah, he just maybe it had something to do with him being the deputy chairman of the Berlin Gesellschaft für Rassenhygiene, the German Society for Racial Hygiene. Maybe. Wow. Okay, so he was big. Once again, these Nazis with the hottest cryptid takes and UFO takes.
Yeah, they have very hot cryptid takes. This is also kind of this is an interesting Welteislacher or / Atlantis thing, like world ice theory, because you know this is kind of closing the circle of Atlantis, where it's like, oh hey, we got, you know, mermaids now, we got the aquatic apes, maybe Atlantis was always been underwater, but we just need to combine the Welteislacher, the Atlantis stuff, with the aquatic ape theory stuff to get the real mermaids. But
so he popularized this at the height of World War II. Right.
Yeah, because, you know, humans have we're hairless, we have subcutaneous fat, we have regressed noses, I guess, and we have slightly webbed fingers, you know. So he was like, he didn't believe human beings were ape, and he thought it was during the Cretaceous. So he basically thought that human beings came out of the oceans. But I guess he later abandoned the concept, probably because the SS were like, this is too wacky, and also we descended from the clouds with what I call white brethren. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
To not say we came out of the ocean.
Exactly.
Yeah, or maybe they were concerned that maybe he had quote unquote abandoned the idea because they were letting them on to their undersea bases and things where they were hanging out in their flugal rods and everything.
Could be.
Yeah, I guess there was another guy, Alistair Hardy, who developed the idea of that, apes had to compete. Well, they couldn't compete with people in the trees, so they branched off to deal with aquatic food sources, like shellfish, and that was kind of a little bit of a more boring idea. That doesn't seem like a full-blown aquatic ape. That seems like kind of a littoral ape.
That doesn't feel like a mermaid. That's you're just a seaside person. I don't know. Doesn't feel. I don't know if it'd be enough to make you lose all your hair and maybe be bipedal because you have to walk around or something waist high in the water. I guess. I don't know. I guess bears do that because they hunt in the river or something.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think we wouldn't get all pruny and stuff.
Yeah.
If
I don't
we were
know.
meant to sit in the water for hours at a time.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we used to not get as pruny. We were more calloused or something. It's just a modern thing. I don't know.
I mean, I guess now this is just kind of David Attenborough, I guess, did a special in 2016 called The Waterside Ape, which is really more the idea that, when we got closer to the water and we interact with the water more, then we kind of lost our hair. Maybe, that would maybe make sense, but...
Interesting. Well, David Attenborough also is an overpopulation kind of sus lord, so... kind of hates humanity. He thinks humanity's a shit, and we're, ruining it for the ants and the meerkats or whatever the fuck he makes documentaries about. Sorry, not to be anti-animal, but, he's sus. And interesting that he would, endorse the aquatic ape.
I mean, I guess, this is, there perhaps in the part of the question that I didn't read, there was a little bit of, discussion about the idea of evolution in general, which I think is a very interesting thing, and a theme that you can trace through the whole podcast and all the discussions that we've had, which is that the idea of evolution is probably the most important idea or one of the most important ideas in like intellectual history since like the 19th century. It's not just Darwinian evolution, but the idea of evolution. Period. Like the in
as
the
a
abstract.
process.
Like you can with Blavatsky. Yes, exactly. Process philosophy, perhaps. Right. I guess maybe this is probably like Hegelian in some way. Process philosophy in the broad sense. Like even Blavatsky, even though she's very anti-evolution, she has an idea of evolution. Like George Bernard Shaw's play, about man in 10,000 years and things like that. What is it? I think Man and Superman. That's a different one.
And H.G. Wells,
What was his one that was? Oh, I think it was Back to Methuselah. Yeah, Back to Methuselah. That was the one that's like, human beings just like focus hard enough and then they're able to evolve into being super intelligent beings that, are like thought clouds or whatever.
Wow.
So, there
like
was
kind of the secret meets, full transhumanism. Or I don't know what.
Well, yeah, like the whole idea of evolution, like which was very not formalized. Like Darwin's ideas are not like totally commensurate with what we think about evolution now, and I think there's still like a little bit of dissent around like the idea of evolution and how it actually works. So this idea like created like a revolution. The idea that human beings come from apes at all, whether aquatic or not, is a huge transformation. That was, incredibly impactful, that I think people just do not appreciate what a big deal it was for people to contemplate this idea that really opened the floodgates of, like, new ideas, esotericism, spiritualism, etc., and a ton of controversy. And that was something that, in the Blue Beam paradigm, where, you uncover a bunch of artifacts that somehow disprove every religion, that was something that really was, like, obviously our religions have adapted, so I still am very dismissive of this idea that, and our religions are still true in the case of Islam, so I'm very dismissive of this idea that, it was as soon as we discover aliens or like something like that, like that's dumb. That's not true. But it was something that did create a huge ideological explosion. Yeah.
Even the great Lenin was wrong in that prediction of I think he was right on how to treat them, but he thought just like trust the plan. Like in 30 years, like people are just gonna stop believing in this shit. It didn't quite go down like that. So I think the idea that evolution or its offshoots are gonna like debunk any kind of wider, or they're gonna provide the whole narrative that makes religious beliefs kind of totally obsolete and unnecessary or discredited. I don't see that happening, and I think I am curious about kind of the blank spots that don't get talked about a lot. I mean, evolution is taught in school, and it's kind of the consensus. But you're right that there's still like gaps and things that like we don't quite understand super well. Whether it's about like the process itself or about our particular evolution as Homo sapiens. And I don't know. It did open those doors up. Yeah, and it did open those doors up. I guess maybe with all these people, like the idea that since we evolved all the way from monkeys, then perhaps we can evolve further into something even greater. Yeah.
And people didn't even quite get they thought that maybe like, I do find it an interesting idea related to the aquatic ape thing that like dolphins, they are like choosing, because of course it is true that the ancestors of dolphins were land ungulates or something. They were like quadrupedal land creatures. And I've always found it interesting. I mean, it is kind of like a little bit of a romanticism, but it's interesting the idea that dolphins like chose to go to the sea. I mean, like
it's
but
great. I love
that
it.
is something that people thought would be like humans could just be like, well, there's techniques of evolution or something. Like we can harness them. We can make ourselves evolve. Just like the Atlanteans, we can use our minds to turn a bat into a giant bat that can talk or something. I don't know, like something like that.
It's super interesting.
So I mean, the connection between mankind and the sea is very interesting in general. You have like Freud and the whole idea of oceanic feeling, and we do grow in water. We grow in the amniotic fluid and everything. So Allah says He created us from water, and we are 75% water. I mean, but that's not really unique to humans versus other apes. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and we, I think the idea that like we lost hair to make travel through water more convenient, like, does make some sense. It could be. I mean, there's other reasons I can think of for hair loss, maybe, because I think originally we had to run. We had to like run down our prey stuff. So maybe having a bunch of hair would make it harder to run, more wind resistance, maybe. So whereas apes don't really necessarily do that. Like they don't have to like do long distance running. So that's one thing that comes to mind. But yeah, and in terms of, I mean, I can think of the dolphins hydroplaning to help fishermen as a kind of symbiotic relationship. So maybe another instance of coevolution, like with the dogs, perhaps, the aquatic ape, maybe, we converged. Maybe we are, I saw on Wikipedia, looking up the aquatic ape just now, some people tutting the idea that some were circulating that humans were related to dolphins, but maybe, maybe we are in the distant past. Maybe we're actually brothers. I mean, we are both mammals, so I guess
we are. Very intelligent.
Well,
so
if we ever do mermaids, which we will do,
yes,
we definitely will do mermaids eventually. Maybe we'll come back to the aquatic ape stuff.
Okay. Cool. So then we can move on here to number 15. We got 2 more questions. So from RT asks, remember reading somewhere about an Alan Watts, Esalen, Joe Rogan connection, but can't remember where. Did it ever get covered on an episode? Well, people will have heard our episode by now.
You will now have heard of our KPFA episode where we talked a lot about Alan Watts. We didn't necessarily talk about the Joe Rogan connection, but that is interesting because Joe Rogan is like a super influential like radio, audio, YouTube media personality in the same way. Very different vibe where he's not giving like, these placid monologues about the East. But he still like, is,
bro, ayahuasca. He's kind of doing that instead,
it's true.
But,
they do have certain convergences, but he's kind of like a weird tuning fork for a bunch of different reactionary philosophies.
Totally. Yeah, I think that he's mentioned Alan Watts a lot, and I mean, he talks about ayahuasca and everything. Yeah, I think both like the presence, because I don't know, it's like we don't actually think about Alan Watts, or I think maybe at this point a lot of people don't fully think about him as like a radio host, like a KPFA radio host, and that's pretty much how he established himself.
Master on a mountaintop.
Yeah, like maybe he went on KPFA, but like no, he was like, he had his own show and everything. And Joe Rogan is doing something very similar to maybe kind of like, in a way, like Pacifica Radio or KPFA in general, in terms of being like an alternative radio platform. That is seemingly
intellectual
kind
dark web. Well,
and kind of, he always actually it's interesting actually for a second to think about Joe Rogan and like the philosophy of like Lewis Hill and KPFA and their staunch. Instead, he's like, Joe Rogan's definitely not like a pacifist, but he sees himself as like an open-minded dude who like cares about like spiritual shit and like being a good fucking person and like, I don't know, doing it. And but he's very big about kind of like pro free speech and talking to anybody with any kind of different ideas, even though he tends to talk more to like right wing, like fucking military people or like tech people or something like that. But ostensibly he's kind of like, there's some things on the right, there's some things on the left. Like he's his own kind of fairness doctrine embodied in one person. And he will have like extreme personalities on that might not get platformed elsewhere. Like he'll still have like Alex Berenson on, who's seen as like absolutely unacceptable by like kind of the mainstream media for like his COVID views, or he'll have Alex Jones on and people will get pissed off, just like how KPFA had on like the Daughters of the American Revolution and the John Birch Society and things like that. And he's also got this kind of like, even though he's like a Boston dude who, was in LA for years, like he still has a little bit of that like new age woo-woo kind of KPFA vibe going on too, talking about Terrence McKenna and DMT.
smoking weed all on the air, which KPFA
pioneered. Yeah, he's always smoking weed. Yeah.
Yeah, and he has mentioned he's mentioned Alan Watts a number of times and is like a big fan of him. And I can find a lot of like
that's exactly the kind of I know there's some people out there who are like into Joe Rogan, but I just like don't like I like because like he's in good faith or whatever, or like he's a chill guy. Like ever since Joe Rogan had Gavin McInnes on and he was talking about how like Muslims are inbred and like therefore they're stupid, and Joe Rogan was like, bro, I'm looking up this on Google and like look at this, look at the IQ of like, it's like, shut the fuck up, like, so I just don't like that shit. Like I have no fondness or like appreciation for Joe Rogan at all. I just can't like get behind that type of thing where you're just like such an ignorant fool that like whatever someone comes on, you're just gonna take whatever they say. I understand being polite, but like, and I understand being dumb, but anyway.
Yeah, I guess I found a Reddit post. I mean, I've listened to him occasionally, like but usually it's like almost like Oppo research, like whenever he has Annie Jacobson on or something. The Alex Jones ones are kind of like amusing.
What's the Esalen connection to Joe Rogan though? Because like I'd see the Alan Watts sort of similarity, but
that's a good question. Let me just type that in real quick. Matthew North, Joe Rogan expose on from the Tinfoil Hat Pod.
Joe Rogan exposed CIA, Elon Musk, Maps, Esalen, military, MK Ultra. This is something that a BitChute link that came up with all these taglines.
Wow.
Yes.
This person's citing Jan Irvin. Okay, so I'm gonna pull back from that. But yeah, I know I see that. Yeah, Joe Rogan exposed CIA. It's funny if you type in just like Esalen Joe Rogan. It's all like batshit articles from like weird websites that are yelling about Voices of Esalen. Interesting. Okay, no, I think that's a little different. There's the MK Ultra, Brave New World, triple parentheses IDW. Okay. I don't know what's really going on here, but
if Joe isn't faking as a hardcore drug addict, he probably won't be able to do the show for too much longer. He'll age rapidly if he truly is trying to become Timothy Leary Volume 2 as spun by Jones. I think that's related to the so-called Esalen Institute conspiracy theory. The deep state also likes the phrase cultural Marxism. It's proverbial historic right-wing conspiracy which by nature fractures quite a bit of the population. Maybe Joe will respond. So I guess he's saying Alex was censored because he was exposed as a disinfo agent. The more they pushed him, the more obvious his shtick was vindicated. The conspiracy pertained to conspiracy theory in itself. Okay, so interesting.
There was somebody.
It seems like there's a little bit of discourse out there.
There is a little bit, and I guess there's a guy Duncan Trussell, who I guess has gone on a lot, that talks about Alan Watts, and also a guy named Jason Silva, who I had to look up and see if he was related to the NLP guy, because one of those guys was named Silva, but I don't know. This guy, apparently he's like 40. He's a Venezuelan-American TV personality, filmmaker, futurist, philosopher, and public speaker. He's hosted the National Geographic documentaries Brain Games and Origins. His goal is to use technology to excite people about philosophy and science. The Atlantic describes Silva as, quote, a Timothy Leary of the viral video age. Silva, a former presenter on Current TV, lectures internationally on topics such as creativity, spirituality, technology, and humanity. This sounds sus. Current TV. Talk about a liberal psyop.
Yeah, I remember that.
But I guess he went on years ago. He went on Joe Rogan like multiple times. So I guess he's talked a lot about Alan Watts, and I'm not sure if he is. He seems to have had a pretty storied career for like starting all this in like his early 20s. And he's a fellow at the Hybrid Reality Institute examining the symbiosis between man and machine. Cool. So I'm not sure what this dude's deal is, but
something to look into if we do like a more proper Esalen dive.
Because the Silva method.
I found it hilarious. It does seem like for some reason there's like a huge anti-Semitism like current in this for whatever reason. Maybe it's because a lot of those like intellectual dark web people who he did push, like Eric Weinstein, like Barry Weiss, are Jewish, but
I found this hilarious article that's like about, actually comes back to Robert Heinlein, and talks about, it's called, Is Joe Rogan a Neoplatonist? It says, Joe Rogan is basically a synthesis between Hunter S. Thompson, the Esalen Institute, and the politics of Robert Heinlein's syncretic, quote, third way political philosophy. Whether Joe realizes it or not, is heavily influenced by Neoplatonist thinkers, either directly or by proxy. Terence McKenna, for instance, who Joe Rogan has referenced regarding the stoned ape theory.
Yeah. Talk about apes. He was
blah,
big about dude, they took mushrooms and they fucking got smart. Whoa. Like that's basically, Interesting. Okay, yeah, so I can't confirm that other Silva is related to Jose Silva, who really we should do a whole episode on, because he, the original name of like the NLP, I believe, was Silva Mind Control, and it was all about hypnosis, brainwaves, and all the thing. And he originally started trying to do it to his children to raise their IQs in the 1940s. So it sounds like another kind of weird estimate, and then kind of built it into like a new religious movement. I forget how it intersected with NLP, whatever. But I think, I don't know. We're not really hitting anything. We'd have to look again. We're not hitting anything. I'm sure that Joe Rogan has rubbed elbows with Esalen adjacent people, or like gone to Esalen. I feel like he probably, like, I would bet like a 97% chance he's been to Esalen.
Yeah, I could see it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but definitely don't have any more info on it right now. So
yeah.
You want to do the last one?
We can move on. Yeah, Sandaz Delicid. Wish I got this in before the Q&A. Well, you did. But you guys ever do a deep dive on self-help gurus like Tony Robbins, for example? Dude always seems sus to me. So this is not the guy who killed a bunch of people in a sweat lodge, as I thought. That was, I guess, James Arthur Ray, whose name is like weirdly similar to James Earl Ray. But yeah, Tony Robbins is very sus.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think we did mention him before.
I almost want to do a James Arthur Ray episode before a Tony Robbins episode. But yeah, Tony Robbins is definitely very sus too.
He's very sus. Yeah, I didn't realize he must be like Serbian or something. His name is Anthony Mahavoric. Oh, and then his mom got married to Jim Robbins, and he got that. He had interesting. He had a pituitary tumor, which gave him like a really serious growth spurt, when he was in high school. And so, his pineal gland was already getting kind of, stimulated.
Wow, I didn't realize he was a practitioner of Ericksonian hypnosis and NLP.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep, exactly. And he was. So I remember mentioning him in an earlier episode because I believe in like the introduction to Walter Bowert's Operation Mind Control from like 1980. He mentioned a few people that like helped him sort through a lot of like his research. One of them was L. Ron Hubbard and like the Church of Scientology, who were just on the warpath to get the cyclos. But also he mentioned a young guy. I think he mentioned John Grinder, the co-founder of NLP, and he mentioned like Anthony Robbins as like somebody who helped out, and I was like, oh shit, that's Tony Robbins. So I realized like he was pretty deep in the game with like a lot of these people in like kind of the late 70s, and started out like quite young. So yeah, he did he was practicing NLP. He started doing infomercials in like the late 80s, and then launched like the Leadership Academy seminars in the 90s. And he's been like a kind of a guru advisor to a lot of big people, including Bill Clinton, Wayne Gretzky, Serena Williams, Hugh Jackman, and Pitbull. Wow. Even Pitbull. He has counseled American businessman Peter Gruber, and then Steve Wynn, the casino magnate who got Me Too'd, and Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce, and I believe like is related to the guy who does like Game of Thrones, and was in I believe maybe in Epstein's book. Kind of forgetting right now, but very plugged in people. He's named one of the top 200 business gurus by the Harvard Business Press, but then he did get Me Too'd in 2018. I think there were like 9 women who came out, and there were big articles in like Vice about his kind of sexual harassment. I would 100%
believe that. Yes.
Okay.
I found an amazing quote by him about Me Too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead. I'll say after.
He was at a seminar in San Jose, March 2018. He said, if you use the hashtag #MeToo movement to try to get significance, and certainly by attacking and destroying someone else, all you've done is basically use a drug called significance to make yourself feel good. He went on to tell a story about a, quote, very powerful man who passed on hiring a female candidate even though she was the most qualified because she was too attractive and will be, quote, too big a risk. He later posted an apology on his Facebook page. All right. So that was
very interesting. I did watch his like the Netflix documentary, like Tony Robbins' I Am Not Your Guru
I saw
from
that,
2015.
but I wasn't about to watch that shit. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was creepy. I mean, it was interesting as kind of like watching this guy do his thing, but I feel like the documentary kind of had a, you know, slightly kind of, oh, is this guy really for real? But ultimately kind of like validated him and was like, oh, well, he's just, you know, he's not your guru. Every fucking guru says that, by the way. Every sus New Age guru says they're not a guru. They're not your guru, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, yes. But you know what, though? You know what made me just jump out of my skin a second ago? Which I think maybe we should do, like maybe a kind of Tony Robbins deep dive. Is under the philanthropy tab under Tony Robbins. So first of all, he started getting into the charity in the 90s. He founded the Anthony Robbins Foundation, intended to help the young, the homeless, the hungry, the elderly, and the imprisoned. That sounds good enough, right? But then, how about this? Robbins helped raise money for Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit organization that works with governments to fight against child trafficking and slavery with the assistance of former CIA, Navy SEALs, and special ops operatives. So, wait, what? I had never heard of this, actually. The Operation Underground Railroad, which was founded by a guy named Timothy Ballard in 2013, it's like OUR. It aids with planning, prevention, capture, and prosecution of sex offenders and sex traffickers and works with partner organizations for prevention, victim recovery, strengthened awareness, and fundraising efforts. The organization has been documented for their covert operations with jump teams consisting of former CIA agents, U.S. Special Operations Forces members, and other support volunteers. Operation Underground Railroad's ultimate goal is to eliminate sex trafficking worldwide. As of April 2020, they report 3,000 victims rescued and 182 traffickers arrested.
Is Tony Robbins Q?
No, but the guy who runs this is a guy named Timothy Ballard. Tim Ballard is the CEO. He's also the CEO of something called the Nazarene Fund, and he's an author. And he's made a bunch of big claims about OUR, and his work includes the development of software and internet investigations specifically to infiltrate file share networks where traffickers exchange child pornography. Ballard has assisted in the training of many law enforcement officers in these procedures. He's also testified before the U.S. Congress and has recommended procedures and practices for rescuing children from trafficking rings. And he he grew up in California and attended Brigham Young University. Okay, so he's a Mormon, and he went on a church mission to Chile, and then graduated from BYU, and then, oh my God, he graduated summa cum laude from the Monterey Institute of International Studies with a Master of Arts degree in international politics, then worked as a special agent for the Department of Homeland Security for 10 years. He worked on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and as an undercover agent for the U.S. Child Sex Tourism Jump Team. Most of his career was spent working out of the U.S.-Mexico port of entry in Calexico, California, with the focus on child exploitation and trafficking cases. He has briefed many world leaders on the issue of child sex trafficking, including President Donald Trump in January 2019. Is this guy cute? Holy shit.
Yeah, well, we found him. It seems, his resume seems to check out. He's fighting.
This guy's so sus. Like, he's like a sus, like spook, probably CIA. If you went to the Monterey Institute of International Studies, I'm sorry. I thought that was maybe the institute in Monterey, California, which is very spooked. Wait, no, it is. It is in Monterey, California. It was it's actually attached to Middlebury College in Vermont, but it's in Monterey, California. But this is like a training school for people who are going to become like CIA national security people. And so, they love recruiting Mormons, and just like, I don't know, the boldness. I saw something in this other article here that there's some criticism of them. There was a 2020 Vice investigation found that the organization employed, quote, a pattern of image burnishing and mythology building, a series of exaggerations that are, in the aggregate, quite misleading. For instance, OUR claimed that it rescued a woman named Liliana, who, according to court testimony, escaped by herself. The organization's spending also lacks transparency. You don't say. What is this? Like, I mean, the fox guarding the fucking hen house.
Obviously, it sounds. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I can only imagine.
I can't help but
it's kind of like the rescue of kids from Haiti. Very Pizza Katie.
Yeah, it's very Pizza Katie, and this is the guy, the master of like neurolinguistic programming, mind control, and
I remember he actually was in that movie Shallow Hal, which is one of those like. Really, like, I know this is a cliche at this point, like to say like this movie would not be made today, but this really would not be made today.
Really wouldn't.
It's like basically just like fat jokes, but the main joke of the movie is that Jack Black gets hypnotized by Tony Robbins.
Oh, you're right.
See people's inner beauty, which is not something that like hypnosis would enable you to do. Like if you just to be basically, it's the idea that hypnosis makes you telepathic and you can see people's inner beauty, like without actually knowing them. But there's a fat girl, and he sees her as Gwyneth Paltrow. And so like he's going out with her, and like he thinks she's super hot because she's beautiful on the inside, but she's actually like the whole joke of the movie is like that she's incredibly obese.
Yes. So he cameoed in like a bunch of movies in the 90s.
It's weird that he would do that, like creating tons of misinformation about. See, this is what we're talking about with hypnosis, where like it feeds on the real practice of it feeds on this superstition around it, that it has this ability to make you see like a hot girl where there's like Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit. It gives you the ability to
when everyone has their Neuralink device plugged into their brain, then you can like kind of
augmented reality.
Like augmented reality, exactly. So maybe they were predictive programming us for that. The new future, where
all right. Like, this second part of the Q&A is 4 hours, so let's.
There we go.
Let's watch.
We'll wind it down, but we will. A lot of Sus Lords covered this week. Yeah, a lot of susness. So, thanks to the Grotto again for, providing these queries.
Always.
Yeah. Good stuff as always. We got some big ones already lined up for next month, so see how big it gets, but it's good stuff. So, that's it for now, and until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.
That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about bread, we can talk about gang. Talk about stress, we can talk about rain. Talk about pride, we can talk about shame. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about life, we can talk about pain. Talk about fiends, we can talk about gang. Talk about rap, we can talk about fame. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about hands, we can talk about straps. Talk about dreams, we can talk about laps. Talk about friends, we can talk about rap. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about hoes, we can talk about max. Talk about lies, we can talk about facts. Talk about this, we can talk about that. That's what I'ma do to this one.
Scared to be the type that'll spasm me. 3 grams in a whip and a stack of bricks. Watch as I breeze right past the vision. Every single bar is a cataclysm. Say I lack vision, but my eyes looking real low. Crush every pill saw, homie, get the bill roll. Try to put me all up in the ground, but I still grow. Man, cause he only hitting threes like a field goal. Her brain is a 6, but she look like a model. Pain was a gift till I took it full throttle. Now my reality's crooked and hollow. Drink till I can't even look at the bottle. Hit a little weed just to even out mentally. Overthink everything, nothing makes sense to me. I am a Leo and that is my tendency. 2 bars of ketamine regenerate my energy. My flow sounds classically trained. Shots to the dome like Kennedy. I got that accurate aim. Out on the patio smoking and drinking and yelling out Clackamas gang. Off of a fifth of that crown in a sack full of cane. Out on the patio smoking and drinking and yelling out Clackamas gang. Off of a fifth of that crown around in a sack full of cane.
That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about bread, we can talk about game. Talk about stress, we can talk about rain. Talk about pride, we can talk about shame. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about life, we can talk about pain. Talk about fiends, we can talk about Cain. Talk about rap, we can talk about fame. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about hands, we can talk about straps. Talk about dreams, we can talk about laps. Talk about friends, we can talk about rats. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about hoes, we can talk about max. Talk about lies, we can talk about facts. Talk about this, we can talk about that. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, you pull up at the bar, got the tall bitch nervous. Yeah, they don't be walking up like they talking, man, they all lip service. Yeah, Indo is not like these rappers. Yeah, they ain't give me 10 feet. Yeah, must be the Leo and the low can be. Pain hurt till the Remy hit sweet. Yeah, only a sucker would say that it's hard to be honest. Let the great Northwest in this bitch, my cigar is the bombest. We're ducking through the alley in the dark to the car, me and Thomas. Had the black car heart just like Mikey Clark in the convict. Yeah, the drugs come cheap and the murder come fast. Every res look like the front of Skid Row. Big bro hit me wanna come and get blowed. Everybody look funny when my money get low. It's facts. Yeah, I earned what I got going hard in the trenches. Guys with the stars on their cars trying to lynch us. Put me in the cage, but the bars are defenseless. What? Big pun intended if you catch those. Everybody ain't keeping up with the prodigy. Need to change the shoes before the show, bitch. Mr. Rogers, puff on a lot of tree. Put the ink to the scroll, let them follow me. You can cry, you can bite, you can rap. Put the blow with the mescaline, ketamine, acid, and put it all in the same sack. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about bread, we can talk about game. Talk about stress, we can talk about rain. Talk about pride, we can talk about shame. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about life, we can talk about pain. Talk about fiends, we can talk about Cain. Talk about rap, we can talk about fame. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about hands, we can talk about straps. Talk about dreams, we can talk about laps. Talk about friends, we can talk about rats. That's what I'ma do to this one. Yeah, talk about hoes, we can talk about max. Talk about lies, we can talk about facts. Talk about this, we can talk about that. That's what I'ma do to this one.